Hello, hello. Greetings, folks. It's a pleasure to see you today. My name is Dustin Cormier, and this is another episode of How to Rock Astrology. Excuse me while I get my chat going here. Today's episode, we are going to be discussing Natal Pluto in difficult houses. I recently have been doing some videos on the outer planets, and I carved out a bunch of stuff, and I decided that I'm going to take some time to do a decent video on Pluto and to really get into the guts of what Pluto is all about. And that's what we're going through today. This is, of course, a live stream, so anybody hanging out with us live can feel free to say hello. I've already got my friend Irene Mack saying hi. Friend Genius POV. It's nice to see you, amigo. So, today we're talking about the elusive planet Pluto, called a planet in astrology, of course. And that's what's important to us as astrologers. Pluto is a interesting, sometimes difficult planet to convey in astrological parlance, because Pluto is one of the outer planets. It is not considered to be connected to the traditional groupings of the seven planets related to the chakras, I should say. So I should have prepared a particular picture, and I didn't, but now I'm just going to get it going here. We ought to know from typical tropical astrology terms that the planets all resonate with the chakras through the signs. This is something that's typically given in Vedic astrology. We see that Saturn rules Aquarius and Capricorn. Jupiter rules Pisces and Sagittarius. Mars rules Aries and Scorpio, the third chakra, the solar plexus. Venus rules Taurus and Libra at the heart chakra. Mercury rules rules Gemini and Virgo at the throat chakra. And then the Sun and Moon rule Cancer and Leo at the crown chakra. So we can see that the first 6 planets resonate with the 6 chakras. I keep saying 6 planets, but there's actually 7. Now the question is how the outer planets fit into these. Some people say that Uranus resonates with Saturn, Neptune resonates with Jupiter, and Pluto resonates with Mars. I wouldn't necessarily say so. My idea is that these 3 planets are something completely outside of the associations that are typically given to the 6 chakras. Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune are just their own thing, whereas the first 7 planets resonate with these chakras. The outer planets are just something utterly different, as I like to describe it. So, defining and describing what we can expect from the outer planets is going to go a little bit different from how we typically deal with the other inner planets that resonate with the chakras. The main reason being because since the first 7 planets, Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn, these planets resonate with signs. The Sun resonates with Leo. The Sun rules Leo. The Moon rules Cancer. Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo at the throat chakra. Venus rules Taurus and Libra at the heart chakra, etc., as we've seen. So all of these planets have friends and enemies. If the Sun is in Libra's sign, it's not only debilitated, but it's in the sign of its enemy, Venus. And that's because there is a primary yin and a yang with the regular planets. As I've often described, Sun, Moon, Jupiter, and Mars rule the fire and water signs. And then Venus, Gemini, and Saturn rule the air signs, right? And there's a primary duality there. That's another picture that I should probably have prepared. And I think I do. Yes, I do. This is just giving me a little bit more context on how to define these outer planets, right? There's the planets that rule the fire and water signs, and then there's the planets that rule the earth and air signs. And usually they don't necessarily do well in each other's signs. Saturn is harmed in Leo and in Aries, although it does fine in Jupiter signs. Nobody's harmed by being in Jupiter signs. That's just how Jupiter is. Mercury actually can do okay in the fire signs, but Venus is, of course, hurt in Leo and in Cancer especially. And the reverse is also tends to be true as well. Sun, Moon, Mars, and Jupiter are often harmed in the earth and air signs. There's a duality here. So this duality is actually created by Vedic astrology. Has this whole system mapped out for why the planets have enemies and friends and why they can do well in each other's signs or not well. So when it comes to the outer planets are not typically conveyed as ruling anything. Even in Western astrology, the appellations given to the outer planets are new discoveries. We have not anciently worked out how the outer planets, are supposed to interact with each other or when they're in signs. So, hello everybody, it's nice to see you here. Love seeing that we got lots of people hanging out with us. So what I've done is I've stuck to the idea of not necessarily giving the outer planets a rulership. Some people say Pluto resonates with Scorpio. That's the closest thing that I can resonate with. Some people say Uranus resonates with Aquarius. I'm not sure about that one. Some people say that Neptune resonates with Pluto. That Neptune resonates with Pisces. I don't necessarily buy it either. Even the Pluto and Scorpio thing, I'm sketchy about. Not to say that it couldn't be the case, but the information on these planets is so new that it would have to take time for, if 1,000 years come by and we're all still pretty set on a certain thing, then I'll probably roll with that. But Pluto is only discovered within the last 100 years. Same thing with Uranus and Neptune. So it's hard to say. But that doesn't mean that we can't deal with the outer planets in a certain way. Vedic astrology has many ways for conveying the strength of a sign. And any outer planet that falls into a sign is going to abide by the typical rules of a lord, a house lord. For example, if Pluto falls into the second house, whatever is the dispositor for Pluto in that case is going to have a big part of the strength of Pluto. This is a sort of a Neo-Vedic interpretation of the outer planets, and this is kind of what we're going with today. So we're going to talk a little bit about the nature of Pluto. We're going to talk a little bit about the nature of how to define the outer planets, and then we're going to get into the specifics of the houses that I intend to convey. Because in Vedic astrology, we do have particularly damaging houses. It's typically these guys here: the 3rd house, the 6th house, the 8th house, the 11th house, and the 12th house. And I'm going to give examples of each of them just so you can all see how Pluto can have difficulty in each of these houses. Pluto can still have difficulty in any of the houses. So we're going to work our way towards discussing these things. And I should have said it a little earlier, but I always get excited and start talking. I'm currently writing a book right now. My book is going to be it's just going to be my journey. It's going to be called Eternal Soul Afternoon. It's my journey coming into spirituality, doing psychedelics, and exploring psychedelic mysticism, writing lots of fun, crazy stories, and lots of cool insights along the way. So keep your eyes peeled for that as it comes along. Now, let's talk a little bit about Pluto. When we look at the symbol of Pluto, we can see that the symbol is essentially a cross, a crescent, and a dot, or a circle. Some of you might recognize that with some of, I show this little slide here in many of my videos. This is a slide that I literally took a picture of from my copy of Cosmic Astrology by Isabel M. Hickey. This Cosmic Astrology book does a great way of breaking down the symbols of astrology. And you can see every symbol, every planetary glyph used in astrology is made up of these three things. There's the circle, there's the crescent, and there's the cross. The sun is obvious, the moon is obvious. Mars is a circle with that little arrow sticking out of it, but the original symbol of Mars was a circle with the cross on top of it. I almost wish I could give an example of that. Let's just see if I've got it in here. I guess I don't have it in here. Too bad. Do I have it in here? No, I guess I don't. Oh, well. Oh, maybe I do. Let's see. Yeah, so this is this little thing from the game Worms, the holy hand grenade of Monty Python fame. It was a symbol of Mars. Mars was a cross on top and the circle on the bottom. That means that the circle of spirit is subservient to the situation, the environment of the earth in this moment. Mars takes the circle and extends it out through the will. It's the infinite circle of spirit, because Mars is like the general of the sun. Before this symbol of the male fertility that we all know, the symbol of Mars as a planetary glyph was essentially an upside-down Venus, because the cross was on top of the circle of matter. Of course, when it comes to Venus, the symbol of Venus is different. The symbol of Venus is the circle of matter is overcoming the cross. The spirit inside of us is exalted over top of the material moment. That's love. The eternal spirit of love is overcoming material diversity, right? So that's Venus. Mars is like an upside-down Venus. So when we look at the symbol of all of the planetary glyphs, it's going to have a circle that represents that which is boundless, eternal, infinite, without beginning and without end. The crescent represents the personality. It's half the circle, the outer aspect of being. And the cross, wherever it is found, symbolizes earth living. So it is the earthy reality. Now, what's interesting about the sign of Pluto is that with Pluto, we have the crescent. The cross is on the bottom. We have the crescent, the personality, is in the middle. And the sun, the eternal spirit, is sort of caressed and supported by the personality of the circle. So Pluto, the symbol, the geniuses who created the Plutonian symbol, are really reflecting Pluto as representing a completion of the spirit made manifest in the personality in a stable way through the material. The spirit, the eternal spirit, is at the topmost. The crescent is in the middle, which supports the spirit, and the material world is subservient to that ultimate spirit. So Pluto, in a way, is a powerful signature of the deepest evolution that mankind can experience. That's sort of what is described by Pluto in a way. So in order for that to be the case, it's truly a symbol of empowerment, really. The eternal spirit of eternal power is supported by the environment through the moon, the emotions. I should say the emotional environment as well as the physical environment through the cross. So the true power is coming through. And this empowerment, of course, every planetary glyph doesn't give you its power for free. They are all symbols of the emerging arc inside of the individual soul. And the emergence of an arc sometimes means that that power has to be met by the repercussions of that power. So Pluto is dealing with a primary evolution of the whole soul in a way. Therefore, it represents, according to the Neo-Vedic tradition, I should say this next, this will be our next section of the video. The three outer planets tend to resonate with, this information comes from Richard Tarnas, and I haven't even read his book. I got it from my friend Nishi Pandit, who's a great interpreter of combining Vedic wisdom with Neo-Western evolutionary astrology, that being Richard Tarnas. Nishi Pandit took his work from Ernst Wilhelm, combined it with Richard Tarnas to make his great work. I recommend him as a intelligent dude. So now the Neo-Vedic way of conveying the three outer planets, what's being said is that while those three outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, were not talked about in Vedic literature, some people are suggesting that there is literature on the deity associated with these, and it represents the Trimurti. Uranus is Brahma, the creator god, which resonates with the sun. Neptune resonates with Vishnu, the sustainer god, which resonates with the moon. And Shiva is the representation of Pluto, which resonates with Mars, which is this sort of catalytic capacity for the power inside of us to extend itself into physical manifestation. It's sort of an octave of Mars, as it is often said. And this is the kind of the Neo-Vedic way of interpreting these outer planets. So when we're dealing with Pluto, we're dealing with power struggles. We are dealing with the capacity for my highest spirit to be expressed amongst other humans and amongst the world and against the resistance of the world. When it is working well and cleanly, what happens is that Pluto has to really, there's a struggle for Pluto to balance itself with what I call Saturn, really. Because Saturn is it's the last planet outside of the outer planets. So the outer planets have got to kind of go through Saturn because the outer planets have a catalytic energy that has to meet the balance that Saturn requires as like a boundary, as the root chakra. And what, when you think about it, Saturn is exalted in Libra. It is the ruler of Aquarius. So there's a union mentality with Saturn, where all humans are in this sort of union mentality where we're all just trying to survive here. And so we create a system, an infrastructure that allows humanity to, nobody can necessarily come along and push each other in humanity more than any other human wants to. We have these laws, we have these rules, we have boundaries of Saturn. Because we don't necessarily want to push ourselves any harder than we need to. So we get conscripted to a social infrastructure that abides by a certain pace based on culture, based on really collective social union and unity. Pluto is what makes sure really all the outer planets have this aspect of pushing humanity beyond its agreed upon limits. Pluto especially has this way of, it's the active power principle with regards to pushing humanity beyond its limits. We use each other through our Pluto to kind of go beyond what Saturn has agreed is our stable limit. And when Saturn and the outer planets work together, It's a very powerful and incredible thing, because Saturn will not push itself harder again than it needs to in all of us. You know, we're like animals that way. We're just going to survive based on, we're only going to go out and chase as many gazelles as we need to. Once we have enough gazelles, the lion rolls his shoulders back. He's like, okay, I'm done till the next time we got to eat. Saturn is very important in this way. But a good Saturn will rest when it needs to rest. It will find the boundaries that it needs to have in order to be stable. Once the stability is attained, then stability for its own sake can kind of fall in on itself. It's not that, it doesn't make us stand out. It doesn't make us exceptional. It's the outer planets that make exceptional energies. And hopefully you got a good Saturn when those are at play, which a lot of people don't. A lot of people still have exceptional energies, but if they don't have a good Saturn, then they might even very well perish. Lots of people in the era of Pluto and Leo found themselves getting huge Plutonian energy through Leo, through the sun, and died at 27, you know, once their Saturn return came along. This is a common thing for anybody with a very hard-looking Pluto, because Pluto is Shiva. Shiva, in the old texts, Shiva, the great and powerful deity representing the absolute, was always getting into trouble with everybody. Shiva's a problem. Shiva is a beautiful, beautiful problem. I'm smiling because I'm so Plutonian in my own way, and I'll say that throughout this video. Shiva is a problem. One of the classic stories about Shiva is the story of Shiva trying to date Sita, who's the daughter of Dakshina. Dakshina, I believe, is the name. It represents old Saturn. It represents humanity who has fallen into Saturn, fallen into predictable ways because they've gotten tired, and they're mainly just trying to eke their life out in the most safe, conservative way possible. Dakshina means talented, skillful one, and it represents, it's Sita's daughter. Sita is, of course, the human ego. Sita is tied between two men. Sita, the daughter, the human ego, is tied between two men. The safety of her father, Dakshina, which is Saturn. Saturn is the protector of law and order in civil society. It's the old Father Earth, making sure that everyone stays in line. Everyone does the rituals, does their spiritual rituals in a ritualistic fashion, just like, you know, Dakshina in some ways is kind of a Vishnu guy in a way. But according Vishnu with Neptune, we're not going to tie that in here. Dakshina is Saturn. Saturn makes sure that I'm doing my duty to do what's safe, to do what's right in society, according to society, so I can be regarded and respected in society as we know it. Shiva comes along, our blessed problem child. Shiva has these ghouls and ghosts and grotesque people who don't brush their teeth, and Shiva and his people hang out at the mortuary. They hang out in the funeral exhumation, the funeral pyres. They cover themselves in human ash from the cremation grounds. They hang out with bones. They're agori people. They're staring at the human skull of life and looking beyond it and saying, what is this life really for? What am I meant to transmit in this life? Despite the pain, despite the grotesque bullshit of humanity, what lies beyond it? It's like Shakespeare staring at Yorick's skull. It's almost a Plutonian moment. And Sita, who is the human ego, tells her father, there's this dude Shiva who follows no law, follows no earthly law, cannot be tied down by the social ramifications that are pinned down by dakshina, by anybody. And Shiva does not look for followers, although people follow him. Shiva does not look for glory. Shiva does not care about anything. All Shiva cares about is complete devotion and surrender to the emerging absolute that is within him. Dakshina is Saturn. Shiva is the eternal spirit of evolutionary growth, where even the most painful restraints of society will not contain the truth that the infinite spirit of absolute truth knows to be true. Anytime anyone in history who's done anything Plutonian that was good was doing it because they knew that there was an eternal truth that society had not caught on to yet. Abraham Lincoln, he freed the slaves. That was a Plutonian thing where the whole world at the time was saying, hey, man, our society is built on these slaves, but someone like Abraham Lincoln, I don't know, I'm not a historian, I don't know what kind of stuff was going on in there at the time, but that's an example. Gandhi's an example. There's probably plenty of examples we could think of people who bucked the system because they knew that they were abiding by a certain truth that was more true than the society at the time, than Dakshina, Sita's father, Saturn. The infrastructure at the time was not yet ready to implode with the magnetism of whatever that new way of thinking was. Tesla probably has a Plutonian energy too. I'd be curious to see his chart myself. Nikola Tesla, if anybody knows him. So Shiva is this character who Sita falls in love with. And Sita tries to tell Dakshina, her father, that I'm going to marry Shiva. And Dakshina wants nothing to do with it. Dakshina is Saturn. And Dakshina will not have this wild character of Shiva in his life. So Saturn and Pluto can often have these struggles together. It can be especially difficult when Pluto is with Saturn, because then the person's one boundary that allows them to have a restful life has Pluto involved with it. Although if you have that, then you got to deal. Especially if it's in a difficult house, that can be a difficult placement. And we're going to talk about one of them in one of our examples. But this is the nature of Shiva, is that it goes beyond Dakshina. I almost feel like I should make this into its own video, because there's lots to be said here in this regard. So Shiva, as Pluto, represents this power struggle that can happen for all of us. And we're going to go through a few examples showing how Pluto operates in the chart. Before we start, I'd like to say that the way that Pluto typically works, like all of the outer planets, the important thing is looking at the dispositor. The dispositor of the planet is the main thing for the outer planets. So look at the sign that Pluto is in. We could probably look up many examples here. Do I have any examples prepared? For example, let's just take this for a moment, because this is one of the first examples we're going to look at. We have a Virgo rising, and Pluto is in the sign of Scorpio. Now, it's in the third house, which is one of these difficult houses, as I've mentioned. So already there's significations of difficulty here. Saturn being there adds more difficulty because Saturn does not like being in Scorpio. But if this person has Mars, let's say Mars is in the 8th house, its own sign of Aries, or even if it's, would probably be even happier is if it was in the, let's say Aries in the 8th house, and the sun is with Mars exalted, and the sun is Mars's friend, and it's not combusting Mars. And Mars has an aspect from its friend the moon, and the moon is full and it's waxing, so it's a very happy moon. And all this stuff is delighting Mars. This would allow this Pluto in Scorpio, since Mars is the dispositor of Scorpio. That happy Mars would give this person a much easier time with their difficult Pluto in the 3rd house energy. Even that Saturn would be helped a lot, because Mars is the dispositor for all the things happening in Scorpio, especially if the 3rd house cusp actually falls here. But any cusp falling in there is going to be well served by Mars as the dispositor. So the dispositor of an outer planet is probably the most key thing that you could have going on there. Now, there are malefic planets that cause damage to anything around it. And this would probably be the case if a malefic is with Saturn. That's the sun, especially the sun combusting Pluto is what I meant to say. Any malefic with Pluto is going to give Pluto a little bit of difficulty. The sun combusting Pluto is especially difficult, but Mars in the same sign as Pluto, especially the closer it is to the conjunction, the more the Pluto is going to be felt. It's going to feel the heat of the malefic energy. Watch out to make sure your Pluto isn't hemmed in. That's when Pluto is here, and then you have a malefic on the left of it and a malefic on the right of it. The malefics are Sun, Mars, Saturn, the waning moon. That's the moon after it's gone past full. Now it's moving closer to the sun. It's waning. The waning moon is considered a malefic, which gives difficulty to Saturn, difficulty to Pluto, and as well technically a Mercury that is closer to a malefic than it is to a benefic. If Mercury is right next to a malefic, it becomes malefic itself. If Pluto is hemmed in by malefics, it's difficult. If it's in the same sign as malefics, then there's going to be some difficulty there. And if Pluto's dispositor is damaged. These are the big signals that there's something going on with Pluto, and that Pluto is involved in some kind of Plutonian struggle. And this will especially be difficult if Pluto has any of these things happening in one of these houses: the 3rd, the 6th, the 8th, the 11th, and the 12th. Now, this is specifically if Pluto is in any of these signs. But Pluto's lord can be in one of these signs and also cause a bit of this Plutonian difficulty. But mainly here, we're talking about if Pluto is in that house. There is another way. Hello, everybody, again. It's nice to see everybody here hanging out with us. I'm going to say another hello in a moment. Another way to define whether Pluto has difficulty or damage inside the chart is by this little way. Yeah. So I've been big on talking about the gender that can come through in a person's chart lately. This is something I've learned from my teacher, Ernst Wilhelm. Gender resonates with a signature of either feminine yin or masculine yang. Now, part of this is what I call the gender of the person's identity, because these days gender is a 4-letter word. So when I say the chart of a female, this would basically mean the chart of somebody who identifies with being female. The typical biological woman with female body parts, essentially people with vaginas, are going to, maybe we should even consider that as something separate from the chart of a person's identity. Most people who are biologically female and who also identify as female are going to have well, I should say most people, all people who are biologically have feminine parts and who identify as a female are going to be doubly aligned with the female principle. Anybody who identifies with something different than their body just has to account for a little bit more of a mix. That's all. Simple, right? Now, for those people, I lost my page. So let's take the example. This is how Vedic astrology conveys gender alignment inside of the soul signature. Here we have the chart of a female. The sun is in a female sign. Now, when I say female sign, it's earth and water. Earth and water are the yin signs. So the sun is in a female sign, Cancer. The moon, these are the main ones. The sun, the moon, the rising sign Lord, the Atmakaraka. If anybody doesn't know what the Atmakaraka is, it's huge in Vedic astrology. It's the planet with the highest degrees in the chart. For example, I myself have Venus at 29 degrees of Virgo. So Venus is considered my Atmakaraka. So the sun, the moon, the rising sign Lord, the rising sign itself, and the rising sign Lord, which is the dispositor of the rising sign, the Atmakaraka, and whether a person's born at day or night is also depictive of the gender. The sun is in a female sign, the moon is in a female sign, Taurus. The rising sign is Taurus, which is female. The rising sign Lord is Venus, and Venus is in Virgo, which is Earth. It's female. The Atmakaraka is Venus, and that's also in an Earth sign. And this is a person born in the nighttime. We know this because the sun is below the horizon. Once the sun is above the horizon, then the person is born during the day. So, for a person with all this femininity in their chart, and they are a female, they identify as a female, if they have Pluto in a feminine sign, Pluto in a feminine sign like Capricorn is very well supported. Pluto, being an outer planet in the sign of Aquarius, in a chart like this, whose main signature is so female, Pluto is going to really cause this person to reckon with male energy, with what male energy is, and how this person is going to have to deal with it. Now, in the chart of a person who is female and who identifies as female and who has all this feminine strength, the strength aligns with their biological and with their identity polarity. And so an outer planet in a masculine sign is something that it is okay. It's not going to cause them too much difficulty because they are a female and they are in alignment with the male principle by being so aligned with their natural female principle, typically. Although it's still going to be a lesson for them. They're still going to have to deal with the masculinity associated with Pluto and Aquarius. You know, this is less about enjoyment and a sensation and feeling and having, and it's more about doing. So this person has to get out of their shell if they're in their shell and do in the world with Pluto and Aquarius. It's the same thing with a chart of a male. You know, I should say before we do anything that if this was the chart of a male, like for me, I'm a man, and most of my planets are in female signs. So if this is a man's chart and all these planets are in female signs and Pluto is in a female sign, it's okay because they've got support. But a man with all this feminine signature who has an outer planet in the masculine sign is going to have to reckon in a strong way with his biological gender energy. And that would be a painful, tricky thing. It's often when you mix these up that things can go awry. Although, again, most people, male or female, are going to have a mix of male and female energies, right? It's just when you see extremes like in my chart, where you can see most of my signs are female. I'm born at midnight. My Atmakaraka, my rising sign Lord, my sun sign. I think I got 4 or 5 out of 6 of these are in female signs, and I'm a male. So that is going to be a difficult thing to deal with if I have an outer planet in a male sign, which I don't. All mine are in female signs, but I digress. This is a chart of a male. The sun is in a male sign. It's an air. Air and fire are the male signs, folks. The sun is in a male sign. The moon is in a male sign, Aries. The rising sign is male. The rising sign lord of Aries is Mars, and it's here in Sagittarius. So the rising sign lord is male. The Almakaraka is Mars in a male sign. And this person is born in the day because the sun is on top of the chart, right? So if this person has Pluto in Leo and they align with the male identity, then all of this is pretty honky-dory, right? Pluto is not going to cause too much catatonic disruption at the gender level. But if this person had Pluto in Cancer in the 4th house, this is a person who would have to be reckoning with their feminine side in a way that they're really not used to. But a male who is so aligned with male energy is not going to have that much trouble with a Pluto in a female sign because he's meeting the feminine from his own probably harmonious male pole. Again, it's the chart of a female with all these male signs that would have trouble reckoning with her femininity if Pluto was in a feminine sign. She would have to reach back into her femininity. And these are people with like gender dysphoria and these kinds of experiences that can have difficulty in aligning these things because again, most people have all of these mixed up. But this is just another way to convey some of the energy that the outer planets bring about. So, that's another way to describe how to deal with outer planet energy and how to see whether they have support and strength in a chart. There's this whole gender thing that I've talked about. Then there's the dispositor is the huge one. Any malefic aspects or benefic aspects go into the outer planet. And then finally, there is, without further ado, the houses that the outer planets are falling into. And this is going to be the next big significant part of this video. All of this has really just been a little bit of an introductory video. Now, next up, we're describing Pluto in any of these difficult houses. We're going to describe some examples of how we can see Pluto typically working out in one of these houses. I've kind of made a little examples for each one to give us a little bit of taste of what we can expect here. And I hope you guys are enjoying this. And I can see that we've already, as usual, got lots of people hanging out with us, lots of people watching. It's nice to see you, Irene, Mystic Mouse. We've got Moonlight as well as Marcelo Ramonet here from Tucson. A real pleasure to be hanging with you folks. So, I've been saying this with all my videos lately. Oh, look at that. We're 45 minutes in. It's just, you don't really, I don't know. I just love talking astrology. And maybe there will be a time where I should start making more concise videos. But this is just how I am. I think it's the Leo rising in me. I plan, as you can see, I've got pictures planned. But once I start unfolding the thing, time is not my, it's not on my mind. I've got Uranus and Neptune and the North Node in the 6th house of Capricorn. So a lot of the times I just dig into my 6th house and I don't think about the time. I've just been working and having fun and doing my thing while I'm moving along. And I have Pluto in the 4th house. Gosh, maybe that'd be a cool thing to just sort of poke around at. Let me see. That means I have to... Oh, I got Kala here. Yeah, what the heck? Let's do it. Just so everybody gets an idea of who you're speaking to here. As you can see, I'm Leo rising. The rising sign's at about 12 degrees, 12 and a half degrees. And the lord of my rising sign, Leo, is in the 4th house, where the sun is not the happiest. The sun is technically not my strongest planet in my chart, although it gets this nice delight from Mars, which helps a lot. Mars is in its own sign of Scorpio, although it's combusted by the sun, and also Pluto is also combusted by the sun. And Pluto is hanging out with lots of malefics here. Pluto's in my 4th house. It's in the sign of Scorpio, and it is conjunct my ascendant lord. So I do like to think that I've got lots of this Pluto energy coming through me. The 4th house is a bit of a happier space for Leo, because Leo is good friends with Mars. The 4th house, all the cardinal houses are stronger when they're ruled by a malefic. So the 4th house is an okay place for Leo. It's not the best place for the sun, but the 4th house is an okay spot for Leo generally. Leos often are close to their mother. Having Pluto here shows that I am very close to my mother, and it's been a lot of working out mama's boy energy in me in order to come into my fullness and my individuality and my strength while still being close to my mother and loving my mother and abiding by that energy. So that is my energy. Having my ascendant lord that close to Pluto, it gives me the sense, at least in myself, that Pluto is important to me, and that's why I enjoy talking about it. Not to mention that it resonates with Shiva. Now, my friend Brutus has asked, what is a difficult house? Typically, in Vedic astrology, this is the universal map of difficult houses. The 3rd house, the 6th house, the 8th house, the 11th house, and the 12th house. These have varying degrees of difficulty. The 11th house is technically the most inauspicious. The 6th house is less inauspicious, and then the 3rd house is even less. The 8th house and 12th house can be considered unstable, but the 8th and the 12th are kind of neutral, especially as mystical water houses. Oftentimes we'll experience in the 8th and 12th house internal difficulties that end up being necessary roots of strength. And of course, this is what Pluto is in all these houses. Pluto is a necessary strength that we necessarily have to deal with through that house. The 8th and the 12th in particular are the most neutral of all of these, although if there is difficulty, they can be pretty much about as difficult as any of them. And even in these difficult houses, the outer planets can still operate functionally, especially if there's positive things happening with the Lord, with the whole gender thing we've already described, etc. But these houses are generally universally considered to be difficult houses for anything, and that includes these outer planets. So, good question, Brutus, and I appreciate you asking it, and I hope that's clear. Now, let's start to get in here a little bit, folks, and let's begin to talk about the specific examples that I have set up for each of these houses to kind of show how things can go awry with Pluto. And I should say I'm going to be putting out a video soon of Pluto in one person's chart conjunct the north node of another person's chart in synastry, showing that when another person's north node is on your Pluto, they tend to bring it out, and it can be healing, although it can be difficult and painful. Anybody with any interloping connections with somebody's Pluto in synastry and what have you are going to bring out Pluto in the other person, and this is usually for better and for worse. The other person is going to bring out the Plutonian qualities, and if these people are meant to be together, if there's a love there that goes beyond just superficial energy, then there could be great deep bonds of soul growth generated between the two, because the Pluto person finds such relief or just, getting a handle on this volatile energy in the chart can be a blessing because everybody has it somewhere. Although it's a dull note for some people. Not everybody has Pluto strongly emphasized. And I should say, the inauspicious houses is another thing I should mention about any outer planet. When you watch my rising sign series, you'll notice that each rising sign has slightly different house arrangements from the evil third, the evil sixth, the evil eighth, the evil 11th, and the evil 12th. Where, the certain cardinal houses can be inauspicious. It depends on if the planets are a friend to the rising sign. For example, in Leo's case, for Leo rising, Venus is not Leo's best friend. Venus is an enemy to the sun. So that's why Taurus and Libra are not considered the best spaces. So for a Leo, for Pluto to be in the 10th house can also bring difficulty. Although it's not generally as difficult as these universal houses as we're describing here. So there's that caveat too. So let's get into it, folks, and let's start talking about how Pluto can manifest with difficulty through these difficult houses. Thank you, Diane. You're a sweetheart. So, I appreciate you so much, Diane. Somebody has told me that my audio is not matching my video. So, I hate it when that happens. I'm going to quickly get off the stream for a moment, folks, and then hopefully when I come back on, the audio and the video should be fixed. Okay, so hang tight with me. Greetings. Hopefully that has fixed the audio tracking, folks. Let me know if the audio tracking is still not good, at which point we've just got to deal. But usually that fixes it. And thank you, Diane. I appreciate you very much. Let me know if that fixed it at all. In any case, even if it didn't, we got to rock and roll here, folks. So let's get rolling and let's start talking about Pluto. Shiva, working Shiva's magic through these 5 difficult houses. Not fixed. Son of a gun. Shucks. Oh, well. I don't know why that is. I'm being told that my audio is still not perfectly aligned. Gosh, that's such a drag. It must be coming from my software. We can't exactly... we can't stop, so... It's okay. We're just going to have to treat this more like a podcast than anything, folks. Gosh, I hate that, but got to deal with things when they happen, you know what I'm saying? And thank you to Moonlight and Diane for rolling with me on that. Okay, folks, let's take a look at our first example here. This is what we've already been showing. We have a Virgo rising with Pluto and Saturn conjunct in Scorpio in the 3rd house. So Pluto is in the 3rd house here. And like I said, you got to keep in mind that Mars could still be very healthy and it would really help this position a lot. But this is we do have here Pluto in the difficult 3rd house. Mars is not the easiest planet for Virgo. Mars is not an enemy to Virgo per se. It's not an enemy to Mercury. But Mercury is an enemy to Mars. Mars rules the difficult 3rd and the difficult and unstable 8th house. So Mars would be bringing out difficult energies for Virgo no matter what. The 3rd house relates to the Plutonian energy of passion, self-interest, hobbies, aggression, competition, siblings, and rivalry. The 3rd house is actually a natural karaka of Mars. So the 3rd house is kind of a roughhouser kind of energy. It's a pushy sibling rivalry kind of energy. And this is a great example of what can often happen with musicians, is the example I often give. You're in a band or you're in a company of some sort, and you are struggling to contribute. We have Moonlight here saying that they have the Pluto in the third house in Sagittarius. There's many different ways to convey how this is going to turn out. Now, with Pluto in the third, Pluto, Shiva, has a desire to express its power. It's often going to happen in a realm of other people, and this can operate in many ways. This musician example or this company example that I give is like very universal to Pluto in general. It's happened many times in the musical world of the past when Pluto was in Leo, where one musician in the band would just dig their heels in and say, you know what, guys, we got to write some songs. The pressure's on for us to compete with other bands. So, you know what, I'm just going to lean into it and I'm going to start writing some songs. And it's difficult and it's painful and it can just be such a frustrating thing to get your song out there. And there's always a little bit of, like whose songs are the best for what our outfit is. Sometimes one person can write a song for an outfit and it doesn't really fit that outfit. I'm thinking like Neil Young with Buffalo Springfield. Neil Young's songs, not a lot of Neil Young songs really got into Buffalo Springfield. It was mostly the more aggressive Stephen Stills who was writing songs, and his songs would fit Buffalo Springfield. So the whole band would be kind of like, let's pick the Stephen's 3 songs, and then Neil might get a little upset if we don't put one of his songs on there, so we'll put Nowadays Clancy Can't Even Sing on the album, and we'll make Neil happy that way. And Neil eventually felt this and got frustrated and went on his own and did very well. This kind of struggle to get your creative signature into the work is Pluto in the third house. In a company, everyone in the company has to contribute to the company somehow. And sometimes it takes a leader to come along and say, okay, everybody, I know what we should be doing with our research, with our advancement, with our ideas. Pluto in the third can be an inventor consciousness or an innovator, where they push the company to go into roads that nobody else would. I don't know. There's no proof that the Pluto in the third person is going to be right in their thoughts about where they're going with their Pluto energy. But if they put in their hard effort and they haul everybody and they push everybody with a whip, crack of the whip like energy to do something that is extraordinary, then it's tough for everybody. This is like everybody who, is like, these are like, I just watched a thing with my dad. Australia and America were in, it was in like the 70s, and they were in these little ships, and the ships were, like Navy type people, with nothing but sailboats trying to have a speed race to go around this thing, in the water. And the Australian people, all of them had to find a balance between let's go easy so we're not pushing ourselves too hard, but also cracking that whip. All right, you grab the starboard, you grab the whatever. I'm not a nautical person, and do what we got to do to get this ship to sail all the way around as fast as we can. And there's a whip being cracked, and that's Pluto in the third energy. And it can be very positive. It can be very constructive. The third house in particular is one of the houses that gets better over time. Anything happening in the third house, it's called an upachaya house. And the upachaya houses are basically the third house, and even the sixth house also gets better over time. But the third house in particular, how should I put it? The sixth house is always very difficult. The third house is difficult at first, but it gets easier over time. Still considered a little bit aggressive, though, and if there's afflictions in the third house, it'll always cause difficulty. In the case of a Virgo who has Pluto conjunct Saturn in the third house, the narrative of Saturn being in Scorpio is going to be involved, and that shows that the person they'll take a long time to look into themselves and face their demons. And facing their demons is more difficult for a person with Pluto in Scorpio. With Saturn in Scorpio. Facing their demons is more difficult for someone with Saturn in Scorpio than it is for most people. Because Saturn is the sign of its enemy, Mars, here, and it feels like it's always under attack, or it's always vulnerable, or it's always weak. It feels weak, and so it will punish itself, and it's like a glutton for punishment type of thing when Saturn is in Scorpio. Pluto in Scorpio is only going to bring that out even worse. Pluto, with any difficult planet in any situation like this, is going to bring it out. But in the third house in particular, how it's going to bring it out is by this person facing the need to strengthen themselves in order to make positive contributions in a group effort and to make new, interesting ideas that will get the group thinking in new ways. And the Virgo person will find that this is a huge part of their identity, but it's difficult for them. It brings up painful memories of being of use. They might have been bullied when they were young in some way, or they were never made to feel like their contributions could be useful. And then there's a Plutonian catatonic need to eventually fight against that sort of old narrative of theirs. This is the third house, is that Pluto in the third is going to deal with the Plutonian energy of other people by pushing themselves in some kind of group effort and competing in like a sibling rivalry way in group efforts, in a way that could ultimately be constructive, but will still always be difficult for everybody, including the Pluto person who has this pained energy. The sixth house is very similar, as we're going to talk about. Now, with Pluto in the third house, the third house is opposite the ninth. As we can see, if Pluto is in the third house here, then it's opposite the ninth house. So they might have difficulty feeling in alignment with their culture, their family, their father, their ethics, and their religion. It might be a hard, their family might have pushed them to get stuck in one way of thinking about everything, about their lives, about what they're going to do with their future. Their family might have pushed them to be solid and rigid in their cultural values. And this is what eventually makes them erupt in the need to break free from traditional values. But because they have to erupt to break free from traditional values, this might mean that they eventually lose their touch with traditional values. That's Pluto opposite from the ninth. And so that will play into the narrative of this person eventually making peace with Pluto. And so will the ninth house lord, so will Jupiter, so will, so will the planets in the ninth house. In this case, this would be Taurus and Venus for this person. So with Pluto in the third house, don't go crazy trying to prove yourself right in this chosen moment, in your chosen life path, or in attaining perfection in your innovative lifestyle, or in any specific goal in any specific moment. This is a perfectionist energy. Pluto in the third can be an overly perfectionist energy that needs to do things perfectly, or else they'll feel judged, or they'll feel weak. They'll feel like they deeply, 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 deeply failed in the one moment when it was so important to not fail. If anything like this happens, recognize that this might be Pluto operating, and that might have given you a trauma when you were young, when you thought you tried to come to this thing You tried to contribute, to compete against others, and you failed, and you were made a fool of somehow. Might even be that other people instigated Pluto by making fun of you, making you feel weak for having failed or having tried and not really done what you wanted to do. So don't compromise your ability to question authority. Don't compromise your ability to play infinite devil's advocate with reality. And remain in an eternal flow of progress. Find the middle is the phrase for Pluto always. Because Pluto in the third is going to be a perfectionist, and their perfectionism is going to cause a catatonic trauma where they now don't want to try and be perfect at anything. They don't want to try. They don't want to compete. It's too difficult. It was too painful. The one time when I was young, I tried it and I hated it. And now their whole life, they're like a dog with their tail between their legs, always feeling weak because they're not willing to compete or contribute, to fight for their contribution. Two opposites. It's either one way where they're anal about it and they're always trying to do it and they're frustrating people, or they're not doing it at all and everyone thinks they're a sad sap for it. Find the middle. Find yourself in an eternal flow of progress. Don't count the progress. Don't count the wins. Just just be in the flow of facing your Pluto, recognizing the traumatic energy that gets catapulted when you deal with these things, and make peace with it. It's the best thing I could say for Pluto in the third house. And yes, this Pluto in the third info is really relevant to any sign. Most signs are going to have difficulty with Pluto in the third house. Moonlight mentioned having Pluto in the third house in Sagittarius. That's likely a Libra rising chart, depending on how you do your houses. And in that case, for Libra, Pluto in the third house is going to be dealing with Sagittarian ideals. So there's even more related to culture, related to my father's religion, my family's religion, philosophy in general. I have to fight for my own philosophy and push to extract my experience of what my philosophy and theology means to me. That's Pluto in the third house of Sagittarius. In which case, the narrative of Sagittarius is blended in with this narrative of Pluto in the third, which is still going to end up being the same thing. I'm a perfectionist on one hand, and I'm a hopeless runt on the other hand. Find the middle. Don't try to achieve perfection. Just be in the flow of facing your trauma constructively and with help if you need it. Pluto is the one place where help and therapy can be very useful. Pluto can be a lot like K2. Although K2, Mazal Tawab has said that Pluto is a lot like K2. There's truth in that. Although I would say Pluto, while it does carry the past life tone that K2 does, K2 is much more past life oriented than Pluto is. And K2, being the nodes of the moon, is going to have a lot more to do with feeling, with your own internal felt relationship. Whereas Pluto is mostly dealing with traumas that have happened catatonically. K2 can bring out traumas too. They are very close. That's a good observation, Mazal. You'll find that they are very close. But Pluto's energy is more of this catatonic trauma energy, I would say. And power, and dealing with power in the context of other people. K2 really is a power struggle with yourself. Your own dealing with whatever it is that you're dealing with. K2, you're mostly fighting against yourself. With Pluto, you're struggling against humanity at large and other people who are dealing with this fight to instate dignity. Pluto is more egoic. It has to do with balancing the ego in a healthy way. Because oftentimes when Pluto is in the third house, for example, part of the healing of that trauma is to involve yourself with competition and to, find a comfortable place where you can still push yourself to win. But don't go crazy trying to win. Don't count the numbers of how many times you've won. Just do it for the love of the game. That's Pluto in the third. I would say that's the big difference between K2 and Pluto, is that K2, you're fighting against yourself. Pluto, you're fighting against competition of other people. Wonderful. Now, next up on our docket, folks, we've got our next combination. We have Pluto falling into the 6th house. The 6th house deals with disease, illness and health, litigation and enemies, debt, boundaries, and neurosis and neurotic energy. So, this is going to be our next theme. We can see Pluto in the 6th house could really, what it's essentially going to be about is having an idea of how you're supposed to spend your time. And the world around you is going to antagonize you regarding how you spend your time. It's the constant work that we provide. When you think about it, the 6th house is one of the Artha houses. And that's the houses, the earth houses. The 6th resonates with the sign of Virgo, which is an earth sign. And all of the earth houses tend to have this push. The 6th house is the most difficult of the earth houses. The 2nd house is kind of neutral, and so is the 10th house, really, depending on the rising sign. But the 6th house is basically always difficult. The 6th house has to do with how we spend our time. And what will be the case is that we will probably have some kind of traumatic relationship with how we would like to use our time and spend our time. There's typically a sort of a parent, perhaps, when you were younger, there's a parent that's snapping their fingers and saying, "What are you doing over there? Stop playing. Are you playing? What are you doing wasting your time? Come on." When you're in school, your parents might have pushed you, forced you to get in from outside, sit down, and you cannot get off that chair until you are finished your homework, mister. And once you're done your homework, you've got to make sure to say your prayers, or you got to brush your teeth, or you have to do some kind of errand that your father or your mother is transgressing through you, because for some reason they think it's important to discipline you, to be constantly wary of how you spend your time. It's either that, or they have given you no sense of how to use your time, and you pissed away a lot of your time when you were young, possibly in a sense of freedom, which can be very well and good. But if you have Pluto in the 6th house, as you start to get into society, you might find that you can have a starving artist mentality, where it's difficult for you to put in consistent effort into improving your life. So that's Pluto in the 6th. I have a traumatic relationship with my capacity to consistently put in time to improve my life, to progress my living situation. And this will come about because of could come about from many different things, for many different reasons. Again, if the band metaphor, you're in a band with a bunch of people, and everyone in the band is using their time. They're using their time sparingly and using it to live the rest of their life. They hang out with their girlfriends, they go and work their part-time job, and then they put in time to writing songs and practicing their instruments. And they can balance all that. The Pluto in the 6th house person is going to be reminded by their bandmates. And it could be for many things. If you, as a bandmate, you're spending all your time writing music, great, that's cool. So when your buddies all get together, they're going to be happy that you've spent your time, you've shown you're doing this for the band. We get it. But it kind of sucks that Jimmy has to drive you from North Oshawa all the way down to the band practice in South Oshawa every day. Have you thought about getting a job? We all have jobs. We all still write music, just like you do. But we also can get here and contribute for gas money, bro. Where have you been on that? And then the Pluto in the 6th person is like, guys, I spent all my time writing music. I'm doing this for the band. You have no much idea how much I sacrifice for the band. And everyone's like, well, that's great, but you're not stable, maybe you don't work hard enough in a way or stably where you have a hard relationship with getting up in time in the morning. And it's hard to keep a job with Pluto in the 6th because you're compensating with these things. The band, you might have came to the band and everyone's writing a song and you aren't. And they're like, why aren't you writing anything? You're like, oh my God, I got to write something. So you compensate for the fragile 6th house ego by showing them that how much time you've been putting into your songwriting. But now all the other parts of your life are falling apart and they can tell it and they're going to push it on you. It doesn't matter how much songs you write if you can't show up for band practice, or if you can't show up to a gig. We've got a gig in Toronto. Are you going to be able to be there? Like this is the kind of thing that Pluto in the 6th, it's like, I try to give one way by plutonianly compensating for how this group told me that I was lacking in my daily regime of habits. And I fixed that. But now these other things are falling apart in my life, and it's because of you guys, is what Pluto in the 6th might say. And everyone else will just say, hey, man, we're keeping our shit together. I don't know why you can't deal with yours. If you can't keep your shit together, we're going to have to fire you. This is Pluto in the 6th type of energy. And what ends up happening is that with Pluto in the 6th, the person that mainly ends up suffering is the body. It's the health. Where the Pluto in the 6th person, they have a difficult time with boundaries, and they feel a need to compensate, to show everybody that they can keep their shit together by doing everything in a perfectionist way, to the point where it leads them to essentially not give themselves any time for rest, not nurture their bodies, not eat. They stop eating on a regular time. They start sleeping at a regular time because they're doing all these other things. And now they're cracking from the middle. And what happens is you come to the board meeting with all these CEOs and you've been working very hard for all these different CEOs. And you come up and you can't put on enough makeup to stop yourself from looking like a zombie. And the boss is like, Jesus, man. I get it. You got the papers, but go home and go to bed. And I'm thinking about telling you not to come back. We've got our professional bosses from all the other companies here, and you're showing up looking like this. Go home, dude. I don't care how much work you put in. This is like Pluto in the 6th energy. You failed, dude. You suck right now. That's classic Pluto in any regard. Diane is asking, does Pluto in the 6th apply to the sign of Virgo as well? I would say there's similarities, but Pluto in the 6th is going to bring more of this shameful difficulty because Virgo is not necessarily as painful as these houses. Gemini, Virgo, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Pisces are signs. And signs are either good to the rising sign or they're bad to the rising sign. But the 6th house is always going to be a difficult sign for every rising sign. For Leo rising, Leo has Saturn as one of its enemies. And for Leo rising, Capricorn rules Saturn. It rules the 6th house and the 7th house. So the 6th house is difficult. The 11th house is ruled by Mercury, and it's also ruled by the 2nd house. Mercury is actually not that bad to Leo. But this goes to show that every rising sign has a different, slightly nuanced relationship with each of these difficult houses. But these houses are always difficult, and it's not the same as the signs. Brutus is asking if Saturn is obviously key with considering Pluto in the 6th. Saturn is very helpful to anyone who has Pluto in the 6th house, but I would say even more so is Mars. Because in Vedic astrology, Mars is the Karaka of the 3rd house and the 6th house. Mars is also, as I said, a key part of the health of Pluto. I should have mentioned that. Damn, whatever. In the part where I was describing how to have a healthy Pluto, I would say that Mars is a key factor in dealing with the Plutonian energy. But for the 6th house in particular, Mars is also a factor, because Mars is what allows us to push to do our boundaries, push for what's right, and push for what we logically know we need to do, and to keep pushing in order to deal with the problems and obstacles in the 6th house. Mars is really more important even than the 6th house. Saturn is more of an 8th house and an 11th house and a bit of a 12th house thing. But Mars is the 3rd and 6th house goalie. Mars helps things to be dealt with when there's problems in the 6th house. But it's also the dispositor. In the case of our example here, we have Leo rising. Hi there, hello, Elizabethany. Nice to see ya. We got Jamencia, VD, Stephen NGO, my friend Diane, Casey James, and Jessica Corrine. So nice to see all you guys. So, here we have Leo rising. And we have a Leo rising with the Sun and Pluto sort of conjunct or in the same sign, in the sign of Capricorn. I've tried to stick to, Scorpio, Capricorn, and Aquarius, because those are the places where it's easy to convey some difficulty. I probably could have used Sagittarius too. I should have used that for the last one. Because I'm trying to use Pluto signs that people these days will actually have. But I digress. The youngsters are eventually going to be watching these videos, in which case this will probably be a common thing for people, as being a Leo rising with Pluto in the 6th house and the Sun being with Pluto. Nice to see you as well, Mo. And of course my friend Brutus and VD. So Pluto in the 6th house, as we've described it, is going to have these catatonic Plutonian struggles of taking control of your own recreational every moment energy, your habits, your daily routines. And the circumstances around you will demand that you push yourself beyond your healthy limits, especially when there's that gross Plutonian compensation energy that happens, that we've already kind of described, where you feel the need to compensate for your vulnerable Plutonian ego related to the 6th house by showing everybody, look at how hard I've been working for you. That's the main key. That's how you can tell if you are being affected by Pluto in the 6th house. If you feel victimized and enslaved to somebody and you say, look at how hard I have been working for you. And the person says, okay, calm down. First of all, nobody else, you're not making yourself look good here. No one else is enslaving their daily life in order to make this group work. You're a CEO at a board meeting, and you're trying to tell your boss, you don't know how hard I'm working. And the boss is like, dude, I don't give a shit how hard you're working. If you can't deal with working the same amount as everybody else, you either got to get your priorities at home figured out, or this is not the job for you. I'd be happy to give you the second option so you don't freak out at my board meeting like this again. This is Plutonian energy. This is this emotional power trip. And the Pluto in the 6th is tough. It's tough because our own schedule and our own boundaries are something that's supposed to be individual to us. You let me worry about how I keep my body alive, and I'll contribute to my work. and I'll contribute the same amount as everybody else does. When you have to etch into your own foundational walls in order to deal with a Plutonian power struggle that you're dealing with, you're crumbling at the seams, because your own boundaries is what keeps us together, man, you know? Keep it together. So this is why Pluto in the 6th can be a tough one. That's a tough one, you know? Now, with Pluto in the 6th, here is our main word. A, you know, don't go crazy trying to make a perfect schedule. You got to adapt and be flexible with your habits and how you spend your time. And you can't take it personally. This is the key thing, is that the world is going to help you evolve that 6th house energy. So be wary of taking it personally when a circumstance forces you to work beyond your own energetic means. When you push yourself beyond your limits, and you have to in order to fix a situation, that might be the only way that you can slowly crawl and progress forward in life. If you've got lots of positive things happening in the 6th house, this Pluto in the 6th person can be a machine for dealing with debt, for dealing with problems, for dealing with issues. Especially if you've got a very strong Mars, then Pluto in the 6th is a problem solver like nobody else can be. But you've got to make sure that you don't go crazy in the scheduling of all these millions of things. Lean into the 12th house energy a little bit, because Pluto in the 6th house is opposite the 12th house. And this shows that the 12th house energy is what you're probably lacking. Now remember, people say that the 12th house is a house of loss. What this probably means is that at some level, you've got to let some loss happen. This might mean that if you're at that CEO circle and you're trying to do your hardest to stay in that circle to get to the top, if it means that your life is going to get easier down the line, then maybe you should sacrifice a little bit. And when you get home, tell your wife, honey, I am falling apart like a house that is losing its foundational walls. And I need some support right now. I just need to be able to, this is what it is at my job right now. I just need to be able to lean back and relax and not do as much housework as I normally do. It's going to be a couple months. Maybe it's got to be 2 years while I struggle to do this thing. You know, that'd be like if you got Pluto in the 6th and like a long planet is transiting through Capricorn or something like that. Or you're going through a certain period, some kind of certain phase. And if you can get out of that and it'll make your life easier, then this is Pluto in the 6th. You have to push yourself through the 6th to go to that easier level. And so this might happen where you can't get away from the desire to use Pluto in the 6th in this way. When the world conspires to squeeze you for all you can in this regard, don't go crazy trying to make a perfect schedule. Go to therapy. Maintain your boundaries in your personal and professional life. Talk with others about what your essential values and goals are. And make sure, because bosses will use that emotional energy. I can show up and I can work just as hard as everybody. A lot of dickhead executives will go, oh, good, you are traumatized with this regard. Great, that means you're going to prove yourself. You're going to try really hard to prove to us that you're working really hard. I love people like you. Now get over there and mop the floor, or here's some research that you got to go and do it. And I want it on my table by tomorrow. And maybe if you do really well, I'll put your name on the fridge so everybody can see what a good worker you are. And they'll treat you like trash because you've got this emotional vulnerability that people in the business world are cutthroat. Sometimes you'll find yourself faking it and trying to be cool at work, but then you explode on your wife at home. The 6th house is the 12th house from the 7th house. So a lot of times Pluto in the 6th, if you're all perfect and squeaky clean in your professional life, make sure that you don't sublimate that into your personal life. I'm sure that happens to a lot of people with Pluto in the 6th, and I'm sure their wives are as involved with this energy as they are, which is not right, because that's going to bite you in the ass in the long run. Because when that job is done, that job disappears, one day all you're going to have is that woman or that person who you've abused in order to get past that energy. It can be communicated. That's the thing with Pluto. If this is your operation, then you got to communicate your wife that I'm going to be a bit spiky at home because I'm this person. This is who I'm becoming. And it can be worked out if you communicate, if you listen to her boundaries, and you don't give all your trash to her all the time. Generally, it's not a healthy thing, though. But no judgment here, because we're talking Pluto land here, folks. This is often how Pluto works. Sometimes it's painful for everybody involved. But I recommend generally don't take advantage of your wife by abusing her in order that you can be calm at your job. I don't recommend that. That's going to bite you in the ass energetically somewhere along the line. I can assure you of that. Maintain your boundaries in your professional life. That's probably the most ideal thing to do. And tell your boss, look, I need a sick day. I need to take a break. I've been taking a lot of extra work. You know, if you got to do this, Pluto in 6th energy with your job and be on call for them, do it for a bit, but don't wreck your whole personal life and your energy field over it. Tell them that I can't do this all the time. I got to be able to take a break, or else I'm going to blow my fucking head off. Or else I'm going to come here with a gun and blow everybody else's head off. This is that. Pluto in the 6th is, it's one of the tough ones. It has that energy, you know? So go to therapy instead of doing that. Don't go around spewing your catatonic, traumatized energy on the people around you. It's not the right way to operate this. Talk with others about what your essential values and goals are, and expect to sacrifice and cross over desires constantly. This is what happens with Pluto in the 6th, is that you're pretty much going to be sometimes sacrificing your personal life and personal health, your actual health and stability, and your personal energy field, your eating habits, your sleep. You'll sacrifice that sometimes for the sake of the goal at hand. Hopefully, if your Pluto and everything is well placed, then it will be something actually good for you. In this case, so I'll say this first. It's either you're eating away at your personal energy, or you will eventually drop that and then eat away at the professional thing that you're doing in order to reinstate your health and your wellness and to come back into a sane frame of routine. You'll build on that for a while before you have to break that again by going into some other catatonic professional engagement. And you've got to be very careful, because the 6th house can be a bitch. In the case of Pluto, for a Leo rising with Pluto in the sun conjunct in Capricorn, we have a sun here whose full identity identifies with the power that it experiences constantly. So this is an identity that you are, a person like this with that Pluto sun energy is going to confront everyone throughout their whole lives with the fact that I feel victimized by my circumstances and I've got to fight to show everybody that I'm worth something. And so this energy will just probably keep on perpetuating for some of these people. But in the end, they can do great, strong, powerful things with it. So, in those cases, you have to make sure that your ego is not compensating at a deep personal identity crisis with this professional pursuit. It's the ego victimization. It's the soul, feeling at the soul level that I'm a piece of shit and I have to compensate for the feeling like a piece of shit by working hard and showing everybody how hard I've worked. At some level, that's always going to be there for this particular example. But it's not healthy. And you should go to therapy to do your best to mitigate that as much as possible so that you can communicate with your voice and express your boundaries when you have to say to your boss that my whole life is crumbling and I'm not going to be able to continue working for you realistically for as long as I want to be for you. That's how you say it to your boss in a true professional way. This would be a Leo rising with the sun conjunct Pluto, whose sun is not that bad. You say to your boss, look, dude, I get that we're developing this thing where I kind of become a slave for you sometimes and go beyond what I think is my true dignity. I can be that work dog for you. But when I tell you that my boundaries need to be met, my wife at home is crying because I'm getting blistering upset with her, I have to stop. And if you want me to keep working for you, we've got to develop a professional, well-maintained wheel so that I don't get catatonically depressed for too long. I can get catatonically depressed and anxious for a little while, then I got to chill, then I'll come back. If we can't work that out, then I can't work for you anymore. That's how this kind of has to operate. It's a painful situation there, but we can see how that can happen, you know? And as Mazal Tawab has said, it's good to lean into your 12th house energy at that point and let some things go. That's what I mean. The 12th house energy is you saying, look, boss, see this? This means it's time for me to fucking relax now. And you come home and you tell your wife I'm sorry, or you tell your husband that I've been at work like crazy, doing this thing, working my thing. I'm back. Let's take a little time. Let's do a vacation. That's very Piscean 12th house energy. And by doing so, you'll feel like you'll lose the momentum you've built on, because that is this energy. It's momentum. But you have to sometimes drop that momentum and allow yourself to experience the loss of that momentum so that you can actually live a worthwhile, dignified, functional, emotional human life. That's Pluto in the 6th. No problem, Mo. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Brutus has said Pluto in the 6th here, and Brutus is his own wife. I understand. And that, I guess that means that you criticize and will hurt yourself as opposed to hurting the other person. And that's sweet. But this is Pluto energy. And the best thing we can always do for ourselves is to practice self-love and watch for victimization. Wherever Pluto is, if you feel victimized in the way that we're talking about, then that's when you want to, that's a signal that you're not working into your Pluto properly. My friend VD has just given me a little bit of a tip, and I appreciate it so much. Tips are always appreciated and never expected here on my show, folks. Thank you for Nyan. I'm so glad to see you here. Awesome. And Brutus seems to be working, especially having Mars as Zoutmakaraka. You work out a lot of these imbalances inside yourself. I love to see it. Hello, Radha. It's nice to see you. Letting go is key. Absolutely. Okay, very good, folks. That was Pluto in the 6th. I love talking about Pluto because I wear it like it's so in my energy field. Because like I said, I'm Leo rising, and my sun is conjunct Pluto in the sign of Scorpio, with Mars there. So I've dealt with Pluto energy, especially in bands and these sorts of things that I've talked about. And there's Plutonian energy in my book that I'm currently writing. I'm writing a novella about myself and what I've experienced in the world of Pluto. And it's been a good time for the most part of dealing with Pluto. It's been a good time writing about it is what I meant to say. But Pluto is a tough go. But I'm glad to have gone through it because now I can talk about it. And I hope that you guys are enjoying me discussing Pluto in these difficult houses and signs. Next up on the docket, ladies and gentlemen, damn, I love that dark chocolate almond milk. Next up, we have Pluto in the 8th house. Pluto in the 8th house can also be a difficult and tricky one. Although the 8th house, like I said, it's not always as difficult as the 6th, the 3rd, and the 11th. The Pluto in the 8th house energy can be certainly, the word that's used in Vedic astrology is very unstable. VD's asking if I could do a K2 video. K2 and Rahu are on my list for sure. I'm still learning it from my teacher, Ernst Wilhelm. I'm taking time right now to do my book. Once I'm finished my book, I'm going to continue my lessons with Ernst Wilhelm on Rahu and K2, and then I'll be talking about them. But if you really want to know about Rahu and K2, I'm just going to be regurgitating my master teacher, Ernst Wilhelm. If you want to check out his videos, you pay like $35 a month. You have all his videos that whole month. Highly recommend it. Now, next up, we're talking about Pluto in the 8th. Pluto in the 8th is not as bad, typically, as the 3rd, the 6th, and the 11th. But again, the word that Vedic astrology ascribes to the 8th house is unstable. Unstable really means that it's the fixed water house. And again, with Pluto, a key word is momentum. The 8th house is the 2nd house from the 7th, and the 7th house is a business house of intimate interrelations with other people. So it's the grounded things that we build with the 7th house, with other people. So the 8th house is unstable because we've been working on a project outside of ourselves that other people are involved with. It can be a very powerful thing. Anything going on with the 8th house can be a very powerful thing because many hands make light work. And sometimes with humans, powerful and amazing things can happen with humanity. The example I often give with the 8th house is like, imagine trying to chop down a giant tree by yourself. Like, what are you just going to take an axe and just constantly bang, bang for like friggin' like days before you finally start to actually get in there? And at which point the tree's just going to start buckling this way. It's a very difficult thing. So when a bunch of humans get together, what happens is you really just need 3 people to fell a really big tree. One person on one side of the saw, right? You're on that side of the saw and I'm on this side of the saw. We're going like this, and you've got someone at the back pulling or pushing on the tree so that it falls away from the people cutting it, right? You got one person who's constantly pushing the tree so it falls that way. These 3 people together can easily buckle, 3 people working together can do much more than 3 people working individually. So the 8th house can blister with incredible potentials for financial power, for musical power, for recreational power, for creative power, for anything that is supposed to be going on and happening with the 8th house energy. Marcelo Ramonet is asking if Pluto in the 8th is Shiva. Marcella, I would say Pluto in general is Shiva. The 8th house can have a Shiva energy too. It's kind of an interesting way to look at it. But the 8th house Pluto, again, the thing with the 8th house, especially with Pluto there, is that we're all looking to kind of compensate for something that's happened to us in our lives through Pluto, our personal empowerment. So when you're working with other people and the Pluto power starts to come through with Pluto in the 8th house, the Pluto in the 8th can become like a powerful leader. This is what often happens with Pluto in the 8th house, is that, again, it relates a lot with, I think of it in terms of being in a band. Let's take somebody who's in a band. Many of the bands of the 60s and 70s are very typical of the difficulties of Pluto in general. But this is also particularly an 8th house energy because a band is like a bunch of people coming together, contributing individual contributions, and it's under a group banner. But how is the power eventually going to be configured once that group develops a name, develops a brand, develops some fame, develops some energy, develops some money, and some power? What do we do with that power? Where's the direction that we're all going to go? Imagine you're David Bowie and you've got a band and a whole bunch of people around you are also playing in your band. And you're this guy, and you start to crack into the brilliance of David Bowie, where if you're David Bowie, everyone else in this band could be writing things, could be contributing somehow. But David Bowie suddenly comes along and creates this persona, Ziggy Stardust. And he starts writing these songs like in a flourish of activity and creativity. No one else is writing like David Bowie is. So David Bowie takes it on. Okay, if none of you guys are going to do it, I'm going in. And he starts writing these songs, starts being the main writer. Now all of a sudden, David Bowie's band starts playing these songs, and the band catches fire. And now the band is starting to become a thing. So David Bowie looks at everybody and says, well, everybody, I'm kind of the one who's been doing this. You guys are all contributing, but, these are David Bowie's creations. These are my songs. So let's call ourselves David Bowie. What do you guys think of that? I mean, with David Bowie's case, it wasn't some big, ugly turnaround. He was already gaining this confidence. People knew that he was this thing, so everyone tagged along with David Bowie. Now, as time goes along, there's this big operation. The leader of the band, whoever took the reins of the band, David Bowie's not a good example. Let's say the Rolling Stones are a better example, or many bands are a good example of this. Well, let's say the Rolling Stones, Mick Jagger, no one else is pulling their weight like Mick Jagger and Keith Richards are. So, all right, guys, no one else is going to do it. I'm writing these songs. They write the songs. They start to catch. The Rolling Stones become a hit. The Rolling Stones is not the Mick Jagger show or the Keith Richards show. It's the Rolling Stones. It's a band. So we're all this band. We're all looking to contribute together. And now the bass player hasn't been able to contribute as much to the songwriting because it's tougher for him to write songs. So I'll let the boys do it, and I'll hang in the background, and I'll support them, and I'll play bass. Now, Bill, I can't think of the last name of the bass player, he's now on the dark side of Pluto. And Keith and Mick are on the bright side of Pluto. Where, okay, if this is how we're going to do it, then you're supporting Mick and Keith, and, you're the Art Garfunkel to our Paul Simon. We're writing the songs. As time goes on, the switch is made where the person in the back seat realizes that, okay, now I want to start making my contributions. I'm in the biggest band in the world, and, I do have some songs. Now that we're comfortable, I'm getting some money. I don't have to work my other job. Now I can start writing songs, So Mick and Keith, I've decided to write this song. I think that it's me. It's going to make the Rolling Stones jive a little bit to me, but I think it's a good song. And Mick and Keith look at it and go, well, I don't think it's really a Rolling Stones song. And the bass player says, well, I am the bass player for the Rolling Stones, so technically it is a Rolling Stones song. And they say, yeah, but this isn't really the kind of stuff we've been putting out so far. So why don't you just, keep playing the bass. Maybe someday you'll be able to make a solo act. But this song is not really us. And now there's a Plutonian struggle. Now the person who's been carrying the band in the quiet, serving silently, but wanting to have their band, to have their songs out there, now it's, there's a struggle for the power of being in this band or being a part of it. And in this case with the 8th house, what you'd find is that the position as that bass player becomes other people start wanting to be the bass player. Other people start wanting to be in this group. Other people want to be a part of this moving body known as this magical Plutonian 8th house energy happening, the Rolling Stones. Everybody wants to be in the Rolling Stones. So Bill ended up just sticking around for a long time because he was just happy to be a part of that. But no one took him seriously when he did his solo stuff. This is this 8th house sort of energy. Thank you, Marcella. Thank you so much. Marcella Ramonette has given me a little tip, and I appreciate that very much. The 8th house energy is really, it can be a very tough one. And this is the deeper depths of the 8th house energy. This is how I'm going to describe it. The energy is often relating to cuckolding, if anybody's ever heard of this before. It's something, it's not my cup of tea. Cuckolding is a very Plutonian energy. It's something that happens in the kink world, where essentially a very hot woman is with a man, and sometimes this very hot woman will get with this man for different various reasons, and this is usually how it operates, because women are the hot thing and men are usually the ones simping for the hot woman. A hot woman can find a man, and if she decides to connect with this man for some reason, whatever it is, it could, sometimes it's money, sometimes it's soul, sometimes it's a real genuine connection with this person. But what sometimes happen is that, you get with a beautiful woman and now you're playing defense for the rest of your life. If you've ever heard that, that's something guys often say. Oh yeah, it'd be nice to go out with a chick like that, except that you'd be playing defense for the rest of your life. That's a very Pluto in the 8th house energy, where all of a sudden you've got a powerful person. Now it can happen the other way too. There are many powerful men who are CEOs, and they've got a spot in their business, and they have the hot clothing, they know how to shave, they know how to look like a hot man, especially older men. They say that men, when they get older and they know how to make themselves look good, they age like a fine wine, as they say. And a hot, powerful, older man with lots of money, lots of status, can be this Plutonian 8th house energy too, where a woman going out with a man like this has to recognize the power that this man represents. And when this man calls a certain shot, or if this man says that, I'm going to go and have a liaison with this other woman, it's just, this person I've been seeing occasionally for a long time, and yeah, I'm going to do that, and then we're going to come and I'm going to have dinner with you with the kids, and everything's going to be fine, right, honey? And the woman says, yeah, I guess. I've got this man who I do still love with these kids, this house. It's putting our kids through college. I guess it's not that big a deal if my husband goes and does this thing once in a while. I'll just not really look at it, which is a fucked up thing, and that's an extreme. But this is like the 8th house energy. This is Pluto in the 8th house. I'm dealing with a magnetic object, and I have to fight to defend it, to keep it, etc. So Pluto in the 8th house is usually going to experience that it can't. So why would a person go for a person like this, we might ask? Remember how Pluto works, is it's a compensation. The Pluto in the 8th house person thinks, I could never hold an energy like that. It's possible that when you were young, you might have been made to feel like, thank you, Elizabeth, thank you so much. You guys are really spoiling me with these tips, and I appreciate it. With Pluto in the 8th house, you might have been very young, and you might have had the experience that, you're with a group of friends, and all of your friends are kind of like, you're growing up, you're going through puberty or something like that, and you don't feel like you belong in a state of like being one of the popular girls or one of the popular guys. Or a very pretty girl kind of might have given you, if you've got Pluto in the 8th, you might have an erogenous energy, a sexual energy, or some kind of energy that deals with the 8th house. So they might come up to you and kind of give you some of this sort of like interest and energy, but you probably at that moment are not ready to deal with Pluto yet. You completely freeze and you kind of get frozen in confronting this energy with this person. And they have this, kids are just fucking brutal. So they're like, what, the girl or the guy feels embarrassed that you freeze up to them. And they go, excuse me, I wasn't giving you any attention. And then you feel frozen for the rest of your life. Like, I can't deal with the power of anything that I truly want. And the Pluto 8th house energy holds on to that through puberty, and eventually gets to an age where Pluto starts to cycle back in on itself, especially if another partner has the planet in the sign of your Pluto in the 8th house, and they recognize that you have the capacity to hold them in such high regard, or to be a person who can hold this high intensity energy. The Pluto in the 8th house person might, in order to compensate for having felt like that when they were younger, they might say, I can deal with a powerful woman, or I can get a powerful man, and I can hold that energy. So what happens is that you go and you find yourself an 8th house woman who gets entangled in your money or your power or whatever you represent that is powerful, that has gotten you the ability to have this. And it doesn't need to be money. It doesn't need to be status. It could just be sexual energy that you can host with a person. Being in a band and looking good. You could be poor as a pauper. But if you're in a huge band that's catching fire and, you've got lots of people around you who think that you're this hot shit, the women or the people, there's lots of women who are these powerful figures these days. They flash a little bit of ass on their social media, and now lots of people think that they're this beautiful thing. And now a guy who's handling you is handling a powerful woman. And this is, the guy who goes for a woman like that could have 8th house energy, or the woman herself could have 8th house energy. And it's the same thing with a powerful guy in a band. They could have the 8th house energy, or they could attract women who have 8th house energy with Pluto in the 8th house. Either way, however it goes, the deal is that somebody in the equation is a powerful, attractive, desired object. And the other person has to deal with that reality and has to face when their partner, essentially, the partner of an 8th house Pluto person is going to encourage them. Let's say you've got Pluto in the 8th, you've got a hot woman around your arm, you're walking around town, and some big dude comes along and says, hey, lady, what are you doing? You're a beautiful woman. You're wearing pearls on your neck. What are you doing with a pipsqueak like this? Why don't you come hang around with a real man? And you with the Pluto in the 8th house energy have to deal with this. Many people with Pluto in the 8th house might pull that man's eyes out and eat them in front of him. Yeah, you think I'm fucking weak? Fucking just bite your face off for that kind of like, what? You think I'm fucking weak? And that's like that Pluto in the 8th house energy. Like, oh, you want to see weak? I'll pull your eye out and eat it in front of you. And I'll leave the other one so you can watch me eat it. And that kind of like blah energy is the catatonic state of Pluto in the 8th, where that's not, harming a person to that degree is not playing it cool, is not holding the energy down. If Pluto in the 8th is healthy, you could have a woman like this, or you could be that person, and you could show the power that you have around town. And when somebody gives you this power play energy, you roll your shoulders back and you defuse, and you don't necessarily make yourself look weak, but you and your partner will have found a way to say, excuse me, we have more important things to do. And that guy might get all beefy and shitty about it, but this is part of the positive side of that Pluto in the 8th house energy, is that you get to, if you do it right, you feel like you have this powerful thing, this mystical thing with you, this attractive item. Why do I get the bliss of being this person's Pluto energy? Because ultimately, when someone loves us, when we connect with somebody, it doesn't matter where our Pluto is. I mean, we could have interconnections with Pluto. If that person's north node, let's find our example here. This example that I'm talking about is very typical of what we're showing here. Let's say we've got a Gemini rising, and we've got the Sun and Pluto are conjunct in Capricorn. Now, for Gemini, interestingly, Gemini's 8th house is ruled by Saturn, but the 9th house is also ruled by Saturn. And Aquarius is the Mula Tricona of Saturn. So for Gemini, the 8th house is tied in and actually painted positive. So for Gemini, the 8th house isn't that bad of a placement. But the Sun and Pluto have kind of afflicted, because the Sun is not happy in Capricorn. This is this kind of like energy where the Sun is exacerbated by Pluto and feels the need to defend itself against, for the sake of holding this powerful item that reconstitutes its power inside its ego. It's Gemini rising with the Sun and Pluto and Capricorn in the 8th house. Very typical of this kind of energy. So, this Pluto in the 8th energy can be a lot like this. In the extreme, it's either you are fighting to be in a desired group. Most of the times it's a legacy thing and a will thing, a lot of the times with Pluto in the 8th, where you will have been building on a group. You will have been in the Rolling Stones for all this time, and you were the bass player. You weren't writing the songs, but you were supporting the songwriters by writing bass lines that are just quiet so that the guitar player could stand out, and that's what got Keith to be such a widely renowned guitar player, is because Bill Wyman on the bass wasn't too loud. Bill Wyman's actually pretty good on the bass, but he definitely supported the other members of the band. And I don't know what his Pluto is. I'm just using that as an example. Where you've been in a group for a long time, you've been committing and contributing to that group, but your contributions are not fully seen in the light of what you've really done. And with the Pluto in the 8th, what you want to look for is nobody recognizes the work I've done. And it's almost similar to Pluto in the 6th, where you'll compensate by telling everybody, you don't realize how much I've done for this project. You don't know how much money I put in. I was here when no one else was around. And this is my project. It's got my name on it. This is Pluto in the 8th house kind of energy, where the situation pulls you out of your power for the sake of what this group or this commitment that you've developed on has become. It can be very painful. It's like you've nurtured a baby for so long, a child, and now that child never sees you again. Which, by the way, the 8th house being squared to the 5th house, which resonates with children, depending on the planets involved, children can be very much this 8th house energy. You've been nurturing, putting a lot into a child for a long time, and now your partner goes south, and they take the children with them, and all the energy, all the hopes and dreams that you laid into that thing, that child, that band, that group, that company as the CEO, an investor. Investors are very 8th house people who will invest a lot of money in something. They'll nurture it for a long time. Then something comes along where they kill that thing you've been investing in. And now it feels like a waste. And you feel like a piece of shit because you wasted your energy in the wrong thing. Now, Pluto in the 8th is opposite to the 2nd house. Pluto in the 8th is opposite to the 2nd house. In this case, that would be Cancer for the Gemini rising person. But regardless, if somebody has Pluto in the 8th, what needs to happen at some level is they need to reckon with developing on their own strong sense of second house. You have to use the energy and power you've developed through the 8th house in order to sublimate it into your own second house. And this is true, the 2nd and 8th psychologically relate to the erotic psyche. The erotic psyche relates to abundance, and abundance also relates to finances and power. These things are all very connected. So when it comes to the sexual and erotic, if you find that you're got Pluto in the 8th house and you got a powerful, sexy being around your arm that is the envy of the town, somewhere along the lines, that's going to teach you that your second house, which is Taurus, remember, it resonates with Taurus. It's your own erotic psyche. The 8th house is the erotic psyche of your partnership and your role in that. But in order to truly to be fair and to not be a cuck energy inside of a powerful 8th house situation, the 8th house is going to force you to reckon with the fact that you do have value in this relationship. They wouldn't be around your arm if you weren't contributing something. And it relates to boundaries through the 2nd house of showing what exactly you want your personal relationship to be, your emotional relationship. And if this 8th house energy does not align with what you seek in your erotic vision of what you want your home to be like, that's the 2nd house. The 4th house is kind of like the emotional development of your home, but the 2nd house is like the financial, physical home that you live around in a certain way. How you want your relationship psychology to operate on your end of things, the value that you have and what you contribute. This is all 2nd house stuff. And the Pluto in the 8th is going to trigger you to do that in order to deal with the Pluto in the 8th. Same thing with what you're doing as an important player in a group that's building lots of money. If you're in a band, you got Pluto in the 8th, other guys are writing songs, it's going to start getting you to develop your own repertoire in the 2nd house of your songs that you've created as this bank of songs that you can apply. When you're dealing with a financial situation, you're making lots of money with these people in this group. If you only ever focus it fully just on Pluto in the 8th and the money that's happening there, if that ever goes south, all that money is gone. What you want to do when you've got Pluto in the 8th is develop your own 2nd house, your own financial wellness as well. So in case anything ever happens with that unstable Pluto in the 8th, it can go because you've taken sublimated energy from it, put it into your own skills and knowledge as a financial investor, as whatever it is, and you can take your own energy and make your own 2nd house out of that. Right? Now, Pluto in the 8th can be very difficult, especially with this cuckold energy. So what I've written for Pluto in the 8th is, you might even experience with the cuckolding energy. Some people will find that when it comes to Pluto, you might just have to deal with not necessarily cutting out a person in your life who has this is like a guy who goes out with a girl who has an OnlyFans, and you feel hot because this OnlyFans chick has so many guys simping over your girlfriend, but she's actually hanging out with me. I've seen it happen. And the questions about where is this girl's loyalty lie, and how much are you really a king in this situation for having this girl? How, is that really that impressive of a thing? All these questions come along. And for some guys, that, and even women who go out with powerful men, it might come down at some level to them connecting with the man. They have this 8th house energy there, which means the 8th house partner has to develop boundaries, but also accept that sometimes this doesn't even need to go. This could even be a polyamorous thing that's kind of mild, where you've been with the partner for years. They're still a very hot partner, and they do feel like we've built so much together financially. We're so wrapped up in each other's finances. We're both sexual people now. we're going out together, we're married, we live together, we cook dinner for each other. That's the bottom line here. So if you want to go out, or if I want to go out and see this other person just to mix up the 8th house ball of wax for a little while, I'll do that, or you can do that, and then we'll come home together and we'll save the last dance for me. At which point, boundaries are necessary to describe, like, is this an emotional connection you're making with this other person? Is this going to erode what we have? And it doesn't always need to go to that place. This is Pluto in the 8th, operating constructively in moments like that, which might happen with Pluto in the 8th. Because sometimes the energy is too unstable to keep in one relationship. And, depends on the type of relationship, depends on the person, depends on the 9th house of the people involved. No judgment for people watching who are experiencing this, because I'm Pluto, baby, and if you're going through it, you got a place in my heart. This is the nature of Pluto, is that people will go through these difficult things, and no one can judge. No one can judge what someone's Plutonian energy is moving through, And if you find yourself going through that, or if you find that you're in anything like this, then what I would say is, number one, don't go crazy investing emotional and financial energy into a bonded relationship with another person too much. Because this is Pluto in the 8th. I need to compensate for always having felt weak, never feeling like I was sexy, never feeling like everyone thought I was important. Now I've got a partner, and now everyone sees that I am this sexy, important person. Don't go crazy on that. Even if that's what's happening, if Pluto in the 8th is unfolding that for you, fine. But don't sell your soul to it. Don't sell yourself up river, because you should be learning again to integrate the Pluto in the 2nd house, your own erotic strength, your own value that you bring to this situation. You can apply it that way in this compensating way that Pluto does. But ultimately, you shouldn't be compensating, because you are already beautiful, whether you have this person or not. You just got to unfold that from within yourself. Then the person who is beautiful, who is a symbol of the envy of the town that you have, is just something, an external fact to the deeper love bond that you guys have. Because a lot of the times this will happen with Pluto, is that it's this on the surface. You get with the person because you want them to be the envy of the town, and the two of you are the envy of the town, and there's this annoying energy now, but that is just the doorway to you bonding with a person who might actually be your soulmate. And now none of that shit matters. It's there, but it's irrelevant. It's just a natural part of the relationship you found with this person. Right? Don't put all your eggs into someone else's basket. You should have a diversified, this is very 8th house language. You should have a diversified portfolio of inner and outer goals for your emotional emotional energy and passions. Don't get too wrapped up in any one person. Don't, think that the only way that you'll be happy is by sticking with this one person. And if anything ever happens to this person, oh no, now I'm back to when I was a child and I had no power and I was a piece of shit. No. You had the person. You had the thing. You could hold that. You could wield that ball of fire of that person. Take the energy of that moment and let it dissolve if it has to dissolve, but keep the memory inside you that you did get that thing, and allow that to empower you internally. Don't get stuck on the memory. Don't get caught on the memory, because ultimately this experience with powerful people through Pluto in the 8th is just meant to instigate the realization that you are as powerful and important as these people are, or else you wouldn't have been in that space. You have that energy. And if you find yourself not in that energy, then that was just an experience that Pluto took you through. It's the ego aspect of things, the compensation, that I've got to show everybody I'm powerful because I don't feel powerful. That's when it's a problem, right? It's the cosmic victimization complex. That is when Pluto gets us into trouble. So, don't invest too much emotional and financial energy into another person, but also don't be afraid to bond deeply with another person. Don't be afraid to accept the power that comes from being with somebody who is the envy of the town. Don't shuck the responsibility of keeping a desirable person. You know, people with Pluto in the 8th might feel embarrassed that, you know, like you could be someone with Pluto in the 8th, and imagine if you were going out with Taylor Swift for like a long time, and then Taylor Swift blew up. And now everyone is like, wow, you're this important person, and you're thinking about how powerful Taylor Swift is, and all of the things associated with that might actually have nothing to do with the original reason why you and Taylor Swift started going out together. Now it's John and Yoko, you know? John Lennon and Yoko Ono everyone's looking at them, they're in bed, they're crazy, but all they're doing is just chilling and making love, man, and they're not thinking about, they fell in love because they were in love. And all this other crap has nothing to do with it, you know? So don't be afraid to go out with somebody if there's all these external trimmings of power and what have you. Just be with somebody who you feel like you love for the sake of love. Find out what that means for yourself and deal with the trimmings. That's the best advice I could give for Pluto in the 8th. Also, don't expect to fully control your partner. Don't take it personally, but communicate about feeling cucked if that happens in some moments. Because sometimes it's not feeling cucked for a Pluto in the 8th is not a legitimate direct evidence of a sexual liaison. It might just be where you've got a wife, you got Pluto in the 8th, and you and your wife came together because you wanted to build a life together, and you work very hard, you got a strong 9th house, and maybe your 7th house isn't the best, and you don't give your wife as much as attention as some people do. But you've got a beautiful wife you've attracted her in this way, and now your wife is loyal to you. Your wife, there's no complications here. But your wife plays music, and you don't play music. Now your friend Jerry and a few of your friends, they all play music. And when Jerry is playing and singing guitar with your wife, you can tell there's a beautiful bond that your friend Jerry and your wife has. A bond that you could never have. And you watch it and you start to get nervous because Jerry and your wife are getting along so famously in a way that you've never gotten along with your wife. This is that cucking energy. And in this case, it's not anything bad. This is just Pluto in the 8th. It's not that Jerry and your wife even have feelings for each other. What it is, it's that you have Pluto in the 8th, which means something traumatizing happened with you when you were younger that made you feel not sexy. And now there's this thing happening in your life that makes you feel like your grounding thing, your wife, she feels that Jerry's more sexy than you, or Jerry's got more going on than you. All you got to do is communicate the feeling. And what you got to do is go through the vulnerability and say that I've felt in the past that I'm vulnerable with this world. I've felt in the past like I don't necessarily feel powerful in this way. To hold you. I don't know if I could keep you. I think you're too beautiful to be held. At which point, if your wife is the right wife for you, and if this is a good situation, your wife will say, honey, you are the only person on my mind. I am going to occasionally enjoy the energy of other people, but it's never sexual. It's purely platonic. You are the one who I love because you are more powerful and more beautiful and more loving than you realize. This is a good person for the Pluto in 8th person who can communicate with you about your vulnerability. And in the end, this is how this is going to operate with anybody who has difficulty with Pluto. And I should have mentioned this at some point, is that Pluto in difficult houses requires your partner typically to talk with you about where Pluto is vulnerable so that you can work through it, so you can get past that difficulty. Right? So with Pluto in the 8th, Don't go too crazy investing all of your soul into another person at the expense of yourself. But also, don't be afraid to experience the power plays involved with dating or being with an object of power. And this isn't just with romance, it's with groups, with people at work, with people in a band. Sometimes you got to be vulnerable and tell the other people that I've been feeling like my power is not being recognized, and you've just got to speak to it. And that might make you feel weak. And if the people in your, if you're a CEO telling your other CEOs that sometimes I feel insecure, that might not be the best place. You might just want to go to a therapist and talk to your wife about it, and then find a way to deal with that in a professional way in that professional setting. But if you're in a band and you love the guys you're with, being vulnerable might help you to bond in the band. Bands are such a beautiful Plutonian thing in that way. Awesome. I'm so glad that you guys are all enjoying all these things. There's always so much to talk about with Pluto, especially. You know what I'm saying? And I'm sure you guys can see that by listening to this video. Now, we have 2 more left here, ladies and germs. Let's see. Shayla C is asking Pluto in the 4th. So for everybody watching right now, to answer Shayla's question, this video is particularly talking about Pluto in the most difficult houses. This is Pluto in the 3rd, the 6th, the 8th, the 11th, and the 12th. This information comes from the world of Vedic astrology, where these houses are pretty much always guaranteed, at least especially the 3rd, the 6th, and the 11th, will always be difficult houses. The 8th and the 12th can be difficult and unstable. The word for them is instability, but not necessarily bad. The 8th and the 12th will cause emotional loss that ultimately brings emotional strength in the end. And we're going to talk about that. But the next one up is the difficult and painful 11th house. But before we get into the 11th house, guys, let's take a bathroom break. We've been at this for a while. I'm going to go to the bathroom, and when I come back, we're going to finish up on our next 2 houses. Okay? I'll see you guys in just one moment. Sweet. Welcome. Nice to see you, folks. Okay. Nice to see you, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. This is How to Rock Astrology, and we are currently moving through Natal Pluto in difficult houses. Now, Nynx Luna has asked, is Pluto in the 11th a similar vibe to Aquarius? Just like Pluto is transiting Aquarius right now. No. It is similar by form, but not by energy. And there's a distinct difference. Vedic astrology is very big on these particular houses having a difficult energy, because houses are very different from the signs in Vedic astrology. Vedic astrology shows where there can actually be difficulty, and there's the danger of harsh karmas. Now, a planet like an outer planet falling into one of these difficult houses is not necessarily going to be all bad, because we have to take into consideration everything we talked about at the beginning of this video: the dispositor, positive aspects to Pluto, energetic support from the gender alignment inside of the chart, etc. But the 11th house energy is regarded as being more difficult. It's very important. It's actually, the 11th house is an interesting one. The 11th house is the house of, in a way, the attainment of dharma. It's the attainment of our gains. And it's truly the deepest meaning of the chart. It's the whole purpose of the person being born, in a way. It's the purpose of the chart. It's the purpose of what the person is doing. Which is all well and good so long as there are not difficult complications inside that 11th house. If there is any affliction to the 11th house, a person will feel like their life is a failure. The person was born to fail, and that they just can't get it right. They just can't get it figured out. They just don't know how not to fail. It's like when there's an affliction in the 11th house, everything in their life is just proving more and more and more that everything that they do amounts to failure. Even if I enjoyed it along the way, you can have a happy 4th house, happy 9th house, happy 7th house, happy lover, happy children through the 5th house. You can have all these things, but the whole thing will just feel like all of these things kept me from doing what I was supposed to do, whatever that might be. And this is the plus and minus of the 11th house. The 11th house is important to all of us. It represents what we seek to create and be remembered by through our career, our legacy. It's our gains and attainments, as they say. The aspirations of our work are something that everybody deals with. Everybody's got an 11th house. It's considered to be the most difficult, painful, psychologically afflicting house if there's things going on with it. We all have the 11th house, but not everybody has Plutonian emotional ego entanglements related to it. When it's supported, it's very good, and when it's afflicted, it's perverse. Now, Pluto in the 11th is not necessarily a difficult, painful place. It's probably the case that this is a person who, if it's well placed, if the 11th house is well served, this is somebody who will go through the Plutonian trauma of having had difficult feelings, like there'll be a piece of shit in their whole life, like they're just not good enough to do well. And as time went on, the person learned to deal with that energy and eventually came to compensate for that energy in a way that is actually healthy, that allowed them to experience great gains. In the example of an Aries rising, where Pluto is in Aquarius in the 11th house, if that Saturn of this person is well placed, if it's delighted by Venus and Mercury, if there's positive aspects going towards Pluto, there's no afflictions by any malefics, and if Saturn is not harmed by malefics or by its enemies in any way, then we have a person who will probably do great things in their lives that stand the test of time. The thing is that Pluto in the 11th house, again, is going to have the energy have an energy which everybody experiences as being a painful, hard-ass pile driver. Remember what we said at the beginning, where Saturn, humanity is a union gig. Everyone's like, hey man, you know how it is on the unions, where if everyone's working at a set pace. If ever someone comes along and tries to show everybody that I can work harder than all of you wimps, then I'm going to come along and I'm going to push and I'm going to really try to push myself. And all you guys, come on, we can work harder than this. And everyone's like, dude, slow your roll. We've been working here for a long time. We've set the pace. None of us want to work any harder than we need to here, bro. So settle, simmer, bring it down a little. But the Pluto in the 11th house person is not necessarily a union guy. They can be, especially with Pluto and Aquarius in the 11th house, in an air sign. They will use the union, but they'll climb up the union ladder. They'll work and contribute very hard to the union so that they can be regarded as one of the higher ups, who's essentially putting in more effort but getting more reward than everybody else. That's very Aries rising with Pluto in the 11th house of Aquarius. Unafflicted, with no trouble there. But however you dice it or slice it, depending, like an Aries rising with Pluto and Aquarius is going to know how to use the union mentality by being a political person, a political leader who is regarded well because they have a respect for the common man. They don't push people too hard, but they find a way to twist it to give the people rewards if they do work hard. So that all the people work for him. He is fair in rewarding them for the effort that they put in, and they remember him and say, we love him because he actually pushes us to work hard for good reasons. Then everybody sees the Aries rising with Pluto and Aquarius as doing very good, important things. They are getting humanity to go beyond their limits, the boundary that they've set for themselves, but it's like training a dog, not through rubbing its nose. You don't rub the dog's nose in the carpet when they take a shit on the carpet. You train the dog through treats and through positive affirmation so that the dog can see when it's good not to shit on the floor. And ultimately, though, sometimes the Pluto in the 11th house person is probably going to have to rub some noses into some shit to teach people not to do the bad thing. But if it's going well, then Pluto will exalt this person for the efforts that they do in their 11th house, in their communal thing that they're working for. The thing is that with Pluto in the 11th, there will be that pained, hard-ass personality of a person who needs to show everybody that I'm contributing, that I'm showing everybody that I'm got something happening, that I've got something special. And it might make a personality that's meek. Aquarian meek. Like ugly, afflicted Aquarian meek. Where, depending on how it is, especially if there's difficulties with Pluto's Lord or Pluto's house, then this can make a person feel like a slave, which makes them compensate by showing everybody that I'm not a piece of shit. I'm not a fucking slave, and here's the work that I can do to prove to everybody that I'm not a slave. I'm not a person who needs to be treated on and stomped on. And this could actually equate, let's say for the example of an Aries with Pluto in the 11th house, and let's say their Saturn is afflicted somehow, and they have a hard time, or their Mars is afflicted, something to do with Pluto or the critical things Pluto needs is afflicted. So this person has somehow been made to feel like they're a piece of shit in their life. They've been made to feel like they are not worthy, or they have gotten bullied, or they tried to make some creation that they put a lot of emotional effort into. They tried to make a model plane, and they somehow, in trying to make this model plane, here's an example. Kid tries to make a model plane to show to his father, to show dad that, after everything I've been through, you know, let's say 5 years old, you know, I'm going to make this model plane and I'm going to really make it something special for you, Dad. So he takes the glue and he's outside and he's working on things. And there's a moment where, for some reason, he takes that glue, he puts it on this table, something splats the glue, and the glue gets on top of the dad's car and the dad's truck. And he sees in like the model airplane glue somehow is smeared all over dad's truck. The kid's like, oh shit. And now it's got this stuff on here and something happens where like dust or like something, or let's say that the glue like ruins the paint on the dad's truck. My computer just skipped and I'm hoping that my voice isn't even worse now, but let me know if my voice is off track with the video. It is what it is. I know it's been off for this whole video. The kid ruins, in this effort to do something emotionally rectifying, to prove that he can do good things. By doing that, he accidentally got this glue on his dad's truck, and dad comes and swears, "You stupid fucking kid. You know, you think you could just go and just work in my workshop and ruin in my truck like this? I need this for work." And the dad just completely goes haywire on this kid, and the kid feels traumatized and connects the trauma to the emotional recompensation of trying to do something to show that his dad could be proud of him. And it's a Plutonian emotional power energy dynamic that squeezes into the kid's brain. So now every time this kid tries to prove himself in any way, there's a psychomimetic memory of there being a problem. Thank you, Elizabeth Bethany. I'm glad to hear that the audio seems to be good. Now the kid has a psychomimetic memory of something traumatic and terrible and catastrophic happening when he tried to act on his Pluto. Because this is what the Pluto in the 11th person is doing. It's part of the Plutonian nature. In order to redeem myself, I want to redeem myself by building the well that everybody can be proud of. Right? Someone asked if Aquarius relates to the 11th house, and it does in a way. With Pluto in the 11th house, there's a desire to contribute by building a well. It's probably a good time to do this old metaphor. This is how the Vedic people explain Aquarius and the 11th house. In ancient days, the Nile, the river, the Ganges, whatever, the river, houses and society would kind of go along the river because that was where the fertility was. But as population grew, people had to get away from the city so it wasn't too populated. So if you're a mile away from the nearest river, you know, the ladies would have to go and walk with the pots and bring the water from the river back to the city, back to the tiny little township. Now, the king of this tiny town has to use that water wisely because they don't have a well built, let's say, right? So they haven't built a well yet, so they had to go and travel to bring water over. Now, one day, somebody tells the king about this idea of a well, and he sees it, and the king says, okay, because the king, being Leo, is the opposite side of Aquarius. The king has to do things for the people in order to be a good king. So the king wants his creative signature for this test that stands the test of time. So, of course, his 5th house is going to be operating through the needs of the 11th house of Aquarius. His Leo is going to be fitted to what the people need. Just like every Leo, every creative person is going to need to attach their creativity to a field that can appreciate it. Attach their 5th house to the 11th house so it can be regarded as being good and being useful and having a legacy. So the king decides, okay, everybody, we need to pool all our resources together into this place so we can build a well. All these agriculturalists, all these people who've been building houses, for the next 6 months or for 3 months, whatever, forget all that. We're putting all our resources into building a well. Everyone's like, God, you know, we're not going to be able to plant plants for those 3 months. You know, we're not going to build any more houses. We're going to have to keep everybody. Like, are you sure, king? You sure it's a good idea for us to build this well? The king says, trust me. This is what we have to do. Our town's getting too big, and if we don't build a well now, we're going to be much thirstier in years to come. Let's build the well now. They build the well. It's a whole painful effort. And the king's like, come on, guys, come on, come on, come on, come on. We need to do this because we've only got so much time before the summer comes. We're losing out on crops. The farmers that should be dealing with crops is here building this well. So let's dig it. Let's get it out of the way. And then eventually the well is this great thing that the 11th house person did, that the Pluto and the 11th person did. And the thing is, with the 11th house, it's different from Aquarius. Pluto in Aquarius is just going to do this, and it's the emotional operation, how it resonates with them. It depends on what house Aquarius is in. Pluto in the 11th is different. That's something that relates to my experience of Pluto. So Pluto in the 11th, it implies that the reason that I'm building is this well is because of some emotional complication that probably happened when I was younger, so that now I can prove to everybody once and for all that I'm doing something really good by building this well. If Pluto is unafflicted in the 11th, it's glorious. Look at the work that some people with Pluto in the 11th have done. It's probably life-changing, world-changing operations that have made the world a better place, usually. But if Pluto is afflicted in the 11th, then this is when we are carrying a wound. And that is why we feel so compelled to work so hard for people to build this well so that everyone can have our glory and memory of our name on their lips after we build that thing. But we, the operation ended up wasting a lot of resources, killing people. People are dying of thirst on the count of trying to build this well for the Pluto in the 11th house person. And when everybody doesn't have full faith in it, it's the Pluto in the 11th house person that is working the hardest to do it. And they might put all their effort into some big thing, and they're lifting all of it themselves, because not everybody necessarily believes in this mission if it's even that important to build a well. You know, I didn't vote for him. I don't know if it's the most important thing. So this person's like, all right, if no one's going to help me, I'm just going to do it. And they push and push and push. And if there's afflictions in the 11th house, you might find that you get 3/4 of the way there and you give up on it because no one's helping you, because you're not trying to ask for help, because really you're getting embittered that no one's helping you, because you're not actually doing it for the people. You're doing it for this emotional compensation complex, and everybody can smell it. So now everybody just feels when they're helping you do this, they're enabling a trauma-based self-embitterment and self-pity that's not empowering for anybody. It's just you're yelling at everybody to help me get this thing done so that I can get my life in order afterwards, so I can get things going after. Now, the thing is that sometimes people will do this, and the people around them will still need to help them because they're their fellow man, you know, and this is a Plutonian energy of a man who's working their ass off, yelling at everybody, and it's causing this bitterness amongst everybody, but it eventually does good. And now the next person next thing this person takes on, they're just as grumpy, and they keep on working in this way, pushing everybody to do what needs to be done on the job, and they're grumpy and bitter, and they're growing through learning to be strong this way, and everybody hates it, but it gets the job done. I've worked on construction. I was doing stagehand for a while with people who have this Pluto in the 11th house energy, where they're just gritting their teeth and, come on, everybody, we got to do this thing or else I'm getting fired and we're all getting fired and all our jobs on the line, so let's just do it. And it can have that energy. It's not a bad thing so long as that compensation isn't allowed to grow through the Pluto in the 11th. Because this is the Pluto in the 11th. It's an ego. This is the true difficulty of Pluto in the 11th. If you have Pluto in the 11th, what you want to watch out for is that you aren't suffering some kind of victimization complex that is causing you to try and glorify yourself in some way by sacrificing and surrendering other happinesses, other goals in your life, other things that you should be working on, just for something that's going to glorify your name for a little bit. Might make you a bit of money. It might even give you some financial relief, you know? But a lot of the times, the more this is based on emotional complications and traumas, the less likely it's going to result in palpable, tangible rewards that will actually support you in your life. A lot of the times, it'll just be much less than you thought it was going to be, and you'll feel embittered. You're not going to be bitter. You know, let's say you write a book and it takes you 10 years to write it, and you've been just writing it this whole time. You know it's going to be this thing. You're not talking with your husband. You're a woman. You haven't been talking with your husband. You've been sacrificing, nurturing your kids in order to write this very important book that you think is going to be very important. You sacrificed years of your life on this project. And when you finally put it out there, it's a book that nobody really cares about or appreciates. And now you are bitter. You're bitter at the fact, you're bitter at yourself that you sacrificed for all these things just for some stupid project that never ended up getting you much in the end. And you only have yourself to blame for neglecting all those things along the way, because you could have done that thing while taking care of all those things. And this is the bitterness that happens with Pluto in the 11th. So that's an energy that can be very difficult. The example that I have again is this Aries. Yeah, we've already shown it. Pluto in Aquarius for an Aries rising. Now, with Pluto in the 5th house, when Pluto in the 11th, but they might find that when they finally get to be a king, they're put in the place where they have to be the guy who creates this well. I can see my screen is tripping out a little bit. Looks like we're okay. They're the king who has to build this well. And their whole term while they're the king for 5 years, they're building wells and they're doing stuff that in times of dire need for their kingship, that is making their creative intelligence be put aside for the immediate problems that need to be fixed in uncreative ways. You just need to do what's proper, what's provided by the regime, by the law, by things that have been going. Usually the Pluto on the 11th will still have creative contributions to make, and people will say, look at what he did for us. But ultimately, it can cripple the 5th house. It can stifle the 5th house. Many will struggle to create harmoniously with others when Pluto is in this house. What? Can you guys still hear me okay? Oh, I see. Now I can tell that my computer is going through a moment. Let's take a moment for here, folks. Can you guys hear me, hopefully? I'm hoping you guys can still hear me. I'm going to sign out and in, and when I come back, hopefully we should be able to see. Okay, good. At least you can hear. That's my internet, I guess. Hello, 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 hello. Okay, hopefully this has fixed the video. How are we looking, folks? Can you guys see me okay? Looks like we can. All right. Thanks, folks. It's nice to have an audience who's watching. I appreciate you guys very much. Morgan, Elizabethany, Glux, Robin, Nix, Grounded, Extracts. Thank you all very much. I know. You got dial-up. I don't know. It's just I'm using Wi-Fi. And I don't know. I guess I'm doing my best with the internet here. My dad's watching movies up there, and God bless him. He's having a good time up there. So as long as we can continue along, we're fine. So, yeah, we dig. You know, Pluto in the 11th, the main reason why it's so difficult is because there's an ego compensation. There's always an ego compensation with Pluto. But when it's in the 11th house in particular, there's a key feeling that we need to compensate through some active project that takes a lot of our energy that could end up feeling wasteful. And especially it can mess with your creative capacities. Because of the emotional compensation, the emotional energy takes us out of our creative power. Eventually, the Pluto in the 11th person should find a stable realization that when they were a kid and they accidentally spilled the glue and harmed their dad's truck, Hopefully they can go to therapy and work out whatever happened to them in their childhood to make them so sensitive to their feeling of being worthy. Worthiness is the key. Pluto in the 11th feels unworthy of doing anything, of creating anything great. So when they try to compensate and prove to everybody that they can do something great, it's not coming from a creative space. It's not coming from something that's in the 5th house soul. It's coming from a need to just desperately show everybody that I'm not a piece of shit. And this removes the true creative heart from the situation. And this is why you have to be careful with your 5th house when you have Pluto in the 11th. And make sure you don't lose the 5th house on the way to the glory that you look to instate for yourself. Pluto in the 11th is essentially hard because Pluto calls us to enact an internal stabilization and strength. It feels like it can only be done by attaining some externally palpable greatness, which means if we fail, if we're in a field and we're trying to contribute to our field, someone with Pluto in the 11th isn't going to feel like I finally got it until some kind of external symbol of them beating everybody else at the game in their field. You invented an invention that was finally so brilliant that everyone can appreciate you for it. You know, I wonder if Thomas Edison, I often wonder if he had Pluto in the 11th because he had such struggles, as they say, with creating inventions. And there's someone with Pluto in the 11th would definitely steal an idea from someone else, put their name on it, and get glory for it. And then there be a conspiracy that he never actually created anything original. I know Thomas Edison did some things, but anyway, that's a whole thing. So what needs to happen with the main difficulty with Pluto in the 11th is that the 11th house is the second from the 10th house. It's a created energy that's seen by all. It's an externalized energy. And it's one of the fixed houses, which relates to the ego, relates to the self-esteem. So it's self-esteem that is generated by experiences of our work in the 10th house, standing out and having value amongst our field, amongst our shared profession, and amongst everybody else in the world. So people with Pluto in the 11th want to see those numbers before they can finally say, okay, you know what, I think I did it. I am actually worth my weight. And this can be painful for any partner who's going out with them because them and their partner wants to encourage them to be happy now. You are a beautiful person, and you put yourself through this thing, like Pluto in the 11th can be fueled by hatred of themselves and other people in order to finally do what they want to do in the 11th house. And a partner would be well served for this person to tell them, you are what you are and you have what you have. And I love you not because of what you've done or what you're doing. I respect it. But this energy, this anger that you have, this feeling like you're not there yet, be here now is a very important phrase for Pluto in the 11th, right? And this is what's needed for the Pluto in the 11th person is to recognize that, you can't go too crazy seeking to be better than everyone or to accomplish some great task. You can't let yourself go crazy letting that be the only thing that's important in your life. But also, what we also have to be careful with Pluto in the 11th is don't be afraid, don't compromise yourself by being bureaucratic about your dreams. This is the other tricky part of Pluto in the 11th, is that this is how Pluto operates, folks, is that the only way out of it is through it. So all this stuff I've been saying about don't put so much emphasis on this thing about compensating with some kind of greatness, it's true. But at the same time, what a lot of people in Pluto in the 11th will experience due to this trauma that I ruined my dad's truck when I was 5 years old and he beat me, and now I've got this trauma of ever trying to do anything. A lot of people with Pluto in the 11th won't try to do anything. They won't try to do something special. They'll feel like they actually can't, and then they won't strive to do it. And they'll always feel embittered, this feeling in their heads, I've never did much. I'm kind of just a waste of life, really. They'll have this kind of energy. And these people shouldn't be bureaucratic about their dreams. They shouldn't allow everyone around them to tell them that your dream is too big, or that, you might have some emotional entanglements and ego complications related to this job, this big thing that you want to do. And when you try to do it, it's too emotionally painful. You want to be a big athlete. You want to make it to the NHL. And you try so hard to do it, and you realize that it's so hard, it takes so many shaking of hands behind closed doors to make it there, that it's just not worth it. It's just not worth me doing it. A healthy Pluto in the 11th person will still apply themselves to the love of the thing that they want to do. They still play hockey because they love playing hockey. Maybe they'll have kids someday and they'll teach the kids, and they'll play with their buddies in backyard hockey where they have some beers. It's beer league hockey, and they do it and they try to win, and they won't win every time, but the wins that they do get, just the fact that they're trying and going for it, sharpening their blades of glory, that is what truly matters to Pluto in the 11th. And they should not, and even if they want to go bigger, they want to go for the NHL, they want to go for some big dream, the Pluto in the 11th person shouldn't compromise on that. Aim for the heights, but don't take the results personally. So this is Pluto in the 11th. Either you're trying too hard because of an emotional compensation complex, or you're giving up completely because of the emotions that trying brings up for you. The key for Pluto, folks, is not the results. The key is confronting the emotional complications. The key is confronting the trauma. The key is dealing with Pluto. And Pluto has nothing to do with the ends. Pluto is the means. And that is what we look for when we're dealing with Pluto. Right? There's always a middle to find. And this would be it in this case with Pluto in the 11th house. So that was a whole lot. And of course, all of these are going to be a whole lot. We got one more left here, folks. I had a feeling that this would be a long video again. But I love to do this stuff, So we're moving on to the next one here, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys have enjoyed that with Pluto in the 11th. Now, next up, we have Pluto in the 12th house. This one's a little bit easier to talk about. It's another classic. When it comes to the 12th house, we're dealing with a cosmic sense of victimization. We're dealing with loss, hospitalization, imprisonment, possible trouble in foreign places, estrangement from loved ones, and isolation, emotional isolation especially. So this is Pluto in the 12th house, folks. I'm glad that you guys are enjoying this as well. I'm seeing some of my comments, and I'm glad to see it. So this is our last one for the day, ladies and germs. We are taking it through the metaphor of Pluto in the 12th. Let's say we're a Libra rising, and we've got Pluto in Virgo in the 12th. So that's an interesting one, because I always try to exercise using Libra rising, because Pluto, with Libra rising, the houses and the signs are switched. So it's always good exercise, and it teaches you a lot about the houses when you can see the difference between a house and a sign. Virgo is the 12th house for Libra, and so Virgo is the ever-clicking clock of time. Pluto in the 12th house is going to have a relationship, no matter what sign it's in, no matter what the rising sign is. Pluto in the 12th is going to deal with dissociation, the painful reality of the need to dissociate. So what happens when we've got Pluto in the 12th house? It's similar to the 6th. But whereas Pluto in the 6th is actually the tougher position. Pluto in the 6th is forced by circumstances to push themselves too hard, to neglect to properly admit their boundaries through the 6th house energy. They neglect to admit that the need for boundaries is there, and so they work harder for everybody at the expense of their health and their well-being and their emotional wellness, and they get angry, and the circumstances condition them to be constantly angry. That's Pluto in the 6th. Victimized by situations that don't allow them peace. Pluto in the 12th is very similar. They feel victimized by circumstances that don't allow them to establish their own peace. And Pluto in the 12th house, people will typically find themselves working harder than they need to. They're not allowing themselves to take the time to have their emotional inner peace. But Pluto will teach them in a different way than the 6th house will. Pluto's circumstances pushes the 6th house person to keep working. Keep working hard. That's how you squeeze it. Pluto in the 12th house will cause you to have a catatonic nervous breakdown, in which you have a nervous breakdown if you do not listen to your body and your emotional needs for rest. You will have a nervous breakdown, and you will start to blink out. Pluto in the 12th can have this weird energy where someone has Pluto in the 12th, where you'll be talking to them, they'll be at a party, and you can see the person, they're short-circuiting. You almost can smell the smoke coming out of their brains because there's too much sensation, there's too much stimulation going on, so they dissociate. And they learn to dissociate at times when sometimes they shouldn't be dissociating. Going too far with working hard, going too far with all these sorts of things. Hoping that I'm not going to lose my screen here. Yeah, looks like we're good. Especially someone with Pluto in this case, for the sake of it, Pluto in the 12th house in general. You might find that you go to a party and you have to recognize that there's an internal emotional shield that the Pluto in the 12th person has to develop. They do it for survival. And again, it's not an external environment thing that happens with Pluto in the 12th. Pluto in the 12th is mystical. And they are pushed to develop a sort of internal shielding process from the shocks and catastrophes that life will bring them, because they can be a very sensitive being. They're a popped open seed with no shield, nothing to defend themselves energetically. And so we're cutting out again. Why? Thank you, guys. Must be my internet. Okay, we're talking about Pluto on the 12th and the shield. Let's keep our minds on that. It is what it is. Hello, everybody. Nice to see ya. It's kind of too bad that my internet is having problems with the internet. But hopefully you guys can hear me now. Yeah, looks like we're good. Okay, so let's keep going. Pluto in the 12th house is overly sensitive. And they have to learn to do two things. Number one, they have to learn to maintain their sensitivity, but learn how to shield themselves when things get too intense. Number two, they have to also be able to reduce a bit of their sensitivity when things are bad, while still keeping their sensitivity to the things that are good. And basically, number three, they have to learn to productively and constructively find moments of meditation and individuated contemplation where they go and find a moment to be alone by themselves and reduce the stimulation of their senses. So they can start to develop a language where they say, hey, everybody, I'm overstimulated right now. I need to take a moment to be by myself and come back into my sense of peace. Got some Plutonian energy happening with my internet. You know, the truth is, I could hear my dad's like watching like some movie with like helicopters upstairs. I don't want to tell him to not watch his movies for 3 hours while I'm doing these videos, you know, so it is what it is. God bless him. Thank you, Elizabethany. I appreciate you so much for giving me this tip. Oh, I can like these things. Cool, I can like all these tips. I appreciate you so much. And as I always say, tips are never expected, but always appreciated on this channel, because I love doing this astrology stuff in general. So I appreciate when a gesture is made. Now, like we said, Pluto in the 12th is extremely sensitive. And what you need to do is make peace with this. You need to communicate, especially with lovers, because this is an emotional house. So this is going to get this sort of thing happens when you've got Pluto in the 12th. You have to reckon with telling your partner, especially, that there is going to be times where you feel too vulnerable. When you get into a fight, you can only deal with so much negative energy. You can only deal with the problems in your relationship so much at one time before you have to just let some of it go for the moment. We'll come back to it when we need to. And unfortunately, the Pluto in the 12th person has to experience what happens with everybody with an important planet in the 12th house, is they experience loss. You can't always... Gray video again? Oh, I saw that coming. We've got a gray video? Oh, I see. Oh gosh, I almost feel like we should just leave the gray video and just let this be the video. You know what, folks? This is our 12th house. Okay? We're dealing with the 12th house now, and we're dealing with the internal energy visage. So, as long as the sound is okay, as long as you guys can hear me, this is going to be our melty ending screen for this podcast. So let's keep flowing here, folks. When somebody has Pluto in the 12th, it's important for you to talk to those around you to develop healthy, therapeutically sound methods of communicating when you are overstimulated. And this might end up being the case where in your professional life, you've got to extend this therapeutic energy towards your bosses or whoever you're working with and for. And this might mean that you can't be in a position where you need to be the top dog who's on it all the time, who's ready to face difficulty, who's ready to face struggle when it happens, to carry your team and hold the position carrying your team. You know, if you're going to blink out while you are doing your job, you know, someone with Pluto in the 12th house, if you have these moments, you might not be able to be like an airplane pilot. You know, you might not be able to be someone who needs to be constantly aware presently all the time. So this might make you miss out on some of your opportunities. When you're talking with your lover about being overstimulated with the difficulty that you're experiencing in communicating in your personal relationships, then you have to be able to reckon with that. And there's going to be times when you can't fix all the things that you would like to fix because the energy of confronting them is so difficult. This is the vulnerability that you need to be able to express to the people around you with Pluto in the 12th. And then as you admit it to yourself, as you reduce the nature of your emotional entanglement in this need to be unstimulated, You will drop your reaction, drop the ego, drop how personally you take it, and eventually this could actually fix a lot of the energy. Because with Pluto, the main difficulty is not Pluto itself, it's the emotional, it's taking it personally that you have this wound. Taking it personally that you have this emotional weakness, this physical weakness, this psychic sensitivity to difficulty and confrontation. So you might be at a party with your partner and you say to your partner, you know what, honey, I'm just kind of, blinking out a little bit here and I've got to just take a moment and I'm too stimulated. I'm going to sit on the couch and I'm not going to say anything. And so your partner goes and talks to everybody and that's Larry over there. He's having a moment, Larry sometimes has to sit and just breathe and detach from everything. He'll come out of it in about 5-10 minutes and he'll be able to join the party. This is the kind of thing that can happen with Larry, with anybody who has this activity, this Pluto in the 12th house sort of thing. So this is how it is often going to work with Pluto in the 12th house. And this is how that energy sort of works and operates. Now, this type of person might find themselves by being overstimulated. I appreciate Glux. Glux has made something funny. Alcohol and drugs are often a way for the Pluto in the 12th house person to deal with how highly psychically sensitive they are. In my opinion, this is the type of energy that is very volatile when it comes to dealing with this sort of energy and using drugs and alcohol to help fix it. You don't want to use drugs and alcohol to fix the emotional energy that is happening to you here, because there's emotional trauma complications that are always rooted to the strange behavioral patterns and the strange hypersensitivity that comes from the Pluto in the 12th house person. This could be somebody who was never allowed to have time to themselves, or it's either they had a 6th house-ish thing happen to them when they were young, where they were not allowed to find time for themselves. They were not allowed to sit and absorb their traumas that they're going through. Let's say their parents were alcoholics and they had a bunch of kids running around them, and there was too much chaos energy in the home. And if they were to go into their rooms and just sit and try to be by themselves, people will be stomping on their door and saying, "Hey, Johnny, where's Johnny? Johnny, why are you in your room? Is there something wrong, Johnny? Come on, Johnny, come on. What's the problem? Are you, he's being a little girl. He's being by himself, like this kind of thing." And you are running away from being able to heal calmly and constructively by yourself. So the other thing that could happen with Pluto in the 12th is that you were forced to be alone, forced into isolation, forced into an experience where you were not able to be at peace with the way that you are, the way that your energy needs to develop by itself. I'm going to try to come online again one more time here, folks, just because I feel like, see me okay? Are we still getting the purple and the pink? It looks like we are. Oh, well. There we go. Yeah, looks like we can see okay. Okay. Thanks for your patience, folks. And God bless my friends here who are watching me live. Now, we've had a few people who are saying that we've had one way or the other. They were either dealing with a lot of craziness and chaos, or they were dealing with isolation. With Pluto in the 12th, either of these can be the case, as we've said. Now, thank you, everybody, for watching and letting me know that I'm back. Pluto in the 12th will either have somebody who could never be isolated in a healthy way, or they were forced to be in isolation. This is the more typical thing of Pluto in the 12th. Either they were forced to be in isolation, or they felt the need, for whatever reason, due to the psychic sensitivity, to isolate themselves constantly in a way that became their escape. That became their handle through which they can hold on to and deal with the things in life that were frustrating them and causing complications. So the person who has been escaping since they were young, and escape was the only thing that they had, they have a trauma. Pluto in the 12th can be very tough, especially if it's strongly afflicted. They could have a true two-way trauma with reality and the one sanctuary that they have, which is being alone by themselves. Because the Pluto will force them to face the fact that they need to develop a relationship with their inside. And they need to develop a relationship with bliss, with also the unconscious, which is not necessarily always blissful. They need to develop a relationship with the unconscious. That's Pluto in the 12th. And what this essentially means is that by being forced to be alone at times, by being forced to isolate themselves, or by forcing themselves by volunteer, by going into their room by themselves into the darkness and just digesting all the crap that's happening to them and trying to digest it in ways that they can safely digest without causing too much catatonic shock to their nervous system, by trying to control the shocks of the world outside, they lose touch with the reality. They start to ignore things. Whenever their nervous system anticipates a shock, they'll dissociate. And not only that, but they begin to not trust their own body's way of filtering the shocks. They begin to not trust their own unconscious. This can be very ugly, ugly stuff. They begin to not trust what they dissociate. And they begin to have a hateful relationship with the fact that all their other friends get to go out and play outside, but they're inside on their pillow just like it's all too much. And they'll hear their friends playing outside, and fuck me, why the fuck am I in here? Why am I the one who's just got this existential dread while everyone else gets to go out and have fun? There must be something wrong with me. I must be a fucked up, shitty kid for not being able to deal with reality. And the painful part is that Pluto, at some level, wants them to get in a healthy relationship with their need to dissociate. And one of the ways that Pluto needs to do this is by making them hate their internal world, their unconscious. Pluto is going to cause antagonism when it comes to being alone. So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't with Pluto in the 12th. Pluto inside the 12th is going to cause antagonism both in and out of reality and existence. Ideally, if Pluto is not afflicted, then this is a person who has great spiritual potential and great mystical potential, where they can see what in material reality is not actually serving their deepest unconscious. So this isn't somebody who's necessarily going to get somebody with Pluto not afflicted and even especially well placed in the 12th house will find they experience loss. They don't get to be a big rock star. They don't make as much money as some people. They aren't as involved in the material world as some people. But their material losses add up to great spiritual gains because they are not, the material world says jump and they don't say how high. They're not cracking they're not, flinching under the crack of the whip of material commerce and finance. They don't need to get rich. They find some job that does the trick for them, that keeps them happy, They get their lover that keeps them happy, and they do their thing, and they can escape from all of that and come sit with themselves and deal with the unconscious energies there, and often find great bliss there. Pluto in the 12th can be a magical thing, but they're like anything with Pluto, like we've described. The good that Pluto represents has to be attained by first dealing with the emotional entanglements associated with that good. Pluto, in whatever house it's in, is aiming to attain that thing. And we can't run from that. Like Pluto in the 11th wants to make great gains in the world. You can't run from that because it's not the gains that are the problem. It's your emotional entanglement in finally attaining those gains, depending your self-esteem on those gains. In Pluto in the 12th, we hang our self-esteem on our ability to escape. And it's until we learn to master escaping from the world, but also being in the world, surrendering to the world, seeing our responsibilities in the world as being part of our rapture, part of our bliss, part of our escape. That is what Pluto in the 12th essentially needs to do. And along the way there, the only way to do that is to remove the dragon at the center of it. And the dragon is our emotional, catatonic feeling that we won't be safe, we won't be a good person unless Pluto in the 12th is attained. That's the tricky thing about Pluto, is that you have to kind of be happy not having Pluto first. You have to be happy and learn to be successful even when you don't have the Pluto thing. In this case with Pluto in the 12th, you have to learn to be vulnerable and tell people that I have a difficult time sometimes with my emotions. Sometimes emotions overcome me, and I just have these catatonic feelings of depression and anxiety where I feel like nothing's right. And I haven't necessarily figured that out fully yet. You know, any partner that a Pluto in the 12th person gets with, you have to communicate about this aspect of yourself and face it. Don't sugarcoat it. Tell your partner that you go through the difficult things that you go through. Because the more you try to ignore it and you don't talk with people about it, the more of a problem this thing's going to be. You have to be vulnerable in order to get to the other side of Pluto. Pluto is this deep weakness inside of all of us. But once we recognize it as a weakness, we allow others to help us move through that weakness together. Then it becomes a strength, because everyone's got Pluto somewhere. You got it in the 12th, but your partner has it somewhere else, and they're going to need help with that too. So for you, with Pluto in the 12th, it's this energy of you're with a whole bunch of friends, and you're that person who is neurotic in saying, okay, everybody, I can't deal with this right now. Everybody's had that sensitive friend where things get too stimulating for the person and they can't watch horror movies because they get too into what's going on, into the pain, into all the things. You know, okay, well, I guess we can't watch Halloween like we planned tonight because Joe is here. So, oh gosh, you know, oh, sorry, Joe. Geez, you know, what should we watch instead? The fucking Care Bears? And, you know, Joe feels embarrassed. He's like, fuck, sorry, guys. You know, maybe I shouldn't have came. And everyone is like, okay, hold on. No. Johnny, shut up. Don't be an asshole. Joe, we love you. Let's watch something that we can all watch together. This is the kind of embarrassment that Pluto can have for Pluto in the 12th, is everyone knows that you're this sensitive person, and people will crack jokes about it and be even a little bit mean. Come on, just get with it, dude. We can all deal with this. Why can't you? Doesn't matter. If you're too sensitive to deal with something, or maybe you just have to deal with something slowly, or maybe you need help, maybe you need support in dealing with whatever this thing is that's difficult for you to deal with. Pluto in the 12th requires you to talk about it, requires you to admit that sometimes this is too much for me. I need to take it in bite-sized pieces. Pluto in the 12th could be somebody who loves horror movies. Got Pluto in Scorpio. you got a good Mars, you probably could be somebody who loves that kind of stuff. Everyone, Pluto and Scorpio, can go to those places. They're interested in human psyche. So if you're a Sagittarius, you got Pluto and Scorpio in the 12th house. Pluto slowly is going to teach you to have the strength to deal with these visceral things. And you might have to deal with it in bite-sized pieces. To the point where eventually, whatever you move through with Pluto in the 12th, you gain strength from it, and then it becomes a way for you to gain strength. So there's probably lots of people with Pluto and Scorpio in the 12th house for Sagittarius rising who will actually watch these horror movies to gain strength and, it's okay, I can deal with this hard visceral aspect of reality. But then they can watch it too much, and then you gotta be careful with that too. You can get too tuned into needing to go through visceral things in order to tune into the strength required for your Pluto in the 12th house energy. Watching things that have this vicariousness, you're living vicariously through the pain of someone else, can be a Pluto in the 12th house energy, where you watch movies or listen to music that has pain and you sublimate it through yourself. And this could be a way for you to do it in the false thing by reading a book, by listening to music, by watching a movie. And this is your way, while all your friends are out actually doing it, you're watching cultural movies and artifacts that put you through it. You can safely deal with it in a false way so that when it comes up in real life, you can deal with it. And even when you deal with it in real life, it brings up all these painful things. Pluto in the 12th can be a tough one. But what happens eventually with Pluto in the 12th is that they become very capable of dealing with all the time shocks, with psychological shocks. And they can actually become healers, and they can help teach people to get through healing. Because the shocks of reality are bombarding us all constantly. And sometimes we all have thick enough skins not to get that harmed by it. But the Pluto in the 12th person has a very thin skin. They're very sensitive. The Pluto in the 12th person, therefore, can teach people that actually we all have mostly thick skins, but there are some places where we do have thin skin. That's usually where our Pluto is. Pluto in the 12th person can teach everybody to deal with those parts of themselves where their skin is thin, because it's all over the place for Pluto in the 12th. It's everywhere for me. Everything I do is a confrontation with mortality with Pluto in the 12th. It can feel like it to them. So when someone is going through a very complicated psychological difficulty that requires intense sensitivity, the Pluto in the 12th person can help them move through that, because they have been through that since the moment that they got out of the womb. And it's power. There's a power that comes from Pluto in the 12th. But with that power comes the responsibility of applying therapeutic methods of showing your boundaries and saying and communicating with everybody when you're at the party, I'm too stimulated, everybody. I got to go sit in the bathroom and breathe. I got to do meditation practices where my energy comes from my crown to my root, and then back to my crown, and then back to my root. I got to do box breathing. All these kinds of therapy things. Most times when Pluto is in one of the mutable houses, it will learn like actual therapeutic techniques to deal with Pluto. Same thing with the 3rd, the 6th, the 9th, and the 12th. The 9th is Pluto's usually fine there. But with the 3rd, the 6th, and the 12th, Pluto will learn therapeutic techniques to deal with its position. And it will be able to teach others about those things. So this is the strength that can come from Pluto in the 12th house. But it's often a double-edged sword. So, with Pluto in the 12th, don't go too crazy trying to dissociate from the world in order to seek inner peace while the rest of your life falls apart. You got to make peace with the fact that loss is going to come from two places. It's either going to come from your emotional sensitivity, which means you can't work the same jobs as everybody. You can't work as hard or as often as everybody else. You might need a different type of schedule than other people to account for your emotional difficulty. And the other side of it is that you might just have to sometimes sit with your emotional pain while you deal with your responsibilities. If you got Pluto in the 12th and your daughter, and you've got a daughter and she is having a catatonic episode in the hospital, you can't run from that. You got to be there, hold your daughter's hand, and you go through the breathing that's going through that problem with your daughter. Sit with her, because she's probably teaching you to get out of your internal time and sit with external time. Because right now your daughter needs you. You need to hold her hand, no matter how difficult it is, where you can't dissociate right now. Sit with the moment. You will be able to dissociate. You'll be able to go back into your peaceful moment when your daughter gets better and you don't have to hold her hand anymore. If you got to breathe through it, use all your techniques to be here in time. And then as time goes on, you'll find another time to go back to your internal thing. But usually, though, what will happen is that it's more like, you might miss your daughter's recitals. You might miss your friends' birthdays, or all these different things, because you have moods that you have to tell everybody, I'm not coming out tonight. That's the 12th house loss. You're missing out on life because you're inside your room dealing with your emotional energies through the therapeutic techniques that you've learned to deal with them through. It's better to do that than to show up at the party and you were victimized because you were lying on your bed and all your friends were playing outside, and now you're in your adult life. You compensate for that by trying to live a very full life, and you have a nervous breakdown. And then you can't be there to drive your daughter to school in the most important times when your daughter actually needs it. This is the 12th house energy of Pluto. Get over the fact that you are going to lose out on some things and deal with the therapeutic techniques that you need to do internally to make you operate your life the best you need to live it. The best thing that can happen with Pluto in the 12th is that you accept that you have some losses and you start to choose what losses are going to happen in your life. You start to allow yourself to accept that there will be losses. And so you chase, the losses are coming by your strategy rather than you trying to run away from this fact, and loss comes to you beyond your control. It's better for you to be the one who is in the flow and who is designing the nature of your loss than for loss to come looking for you. That's the big lesson for Pluto in the 12th house, and for anybody with the 12th house, with anything going on there. So don't dissociate so much from the world while your life falls apart. That will be a lesson for you sometimes, but also learn how much you can comfortably bite off and chew. Things will fall apart, and you'll have to surrender your desire for inner peace sometimes until you get this right. Sometimes things will have to fall apart. Sometimes you will fall apart internally. The best thing you can do with Pluto in the 12th, probably more than any other Pluto position, is to meditate. Make meditation, which meditation is a planned space of unplannable inner chaos. Make a circadian rhythm with it. Because remember, Pluto in the 12th has the 6th house as its opposite. So in order to fully come into health with Pluto in the 12th, you have to absorb and becoming grounded with Pluto, with the opposite, which is the 6th house. Right? If you've got Pluto in the 12th house, you have to embrace the energy of Pluto's opposite, which is the 6th house. Which means that you have to make a circadian rhythm where you choose every day, hopefully early in the morning before you go to work, before you eat breakfast, meditate. And of course, there's two different types of meditation. There's this planned dissociation where you just drop it all. Your just mind becomes a stream as the water moves through your head, and you let the water, you let it all just go through. The other side of meditation, which is true meditation, is samadhi practice. And that's Kriya Yoga, that's Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga, the 8 limbs, where you eventually practice asana, then you practice pranayama, pratyahara, you concentrate on one point, and eventually you seek to attain samadhi. That is a practice that is not for everybody. Well, I'd say it is for everybody, but you're not going to see a person trying to attain moksha through Pluto in their chart. That's more like a Pluto in the 9th thing, but really not even. I do that stuff, and I've got Pluto in the 4th, and it's a journey. So it's important for the Pluto in the 12th person to remember that everybody should attain to samadhi and moksha. And you might be into spirituality and the psychology and this kind of stuff. So you got to make space for not even trying to do samadhi. Just sitting, put your timer on for 15 minutes in the morning and just, you're awake, you're patient, and you're breathing, and you're focusing on nothing but your breath and letting it all swim past your brain until there's nothing left but emptiness. Try to do that twice a day if you can help it, so you develop a circadian rhythm with it. Try to do it at the same time every day, so that just like how if you eat lunch at 1 o'clock every day for 5 years, it's Saturday, you're not working, you sleep in, but you wake up and your stomach growls at 1 o'clock. It's because your digestive fluid has got a rhythm of the digestion at 1 o'clock that you're going to do. Meditation is the same way. If you meditate every day for 15 minutes at the same time, your body is going to get used to getting into that trance-like effect, where you can develop great peace. Pluto in the 12th should keep a notebook. Have contemplation time where you write down all the shit that's on your mind that's ailing you. Just puke it all out on your notebook, and then put it down, come back, enter your life, and deal with the responsibilities that you have. And there will be your small meditation moments that you should do twice a day, and then there'll probably be 1 or 2 days a week where you fully unplug for the whole day, right? You give yourself an ease day. Let it be Sunday. Sunday's a great day for this kind of thing, where the only important thing is meeting spirit in the moment, in the present moment, and being zen. These are the kind of things that can really serve Pluto in the 12th house, so that you can face the responsibility of needing to dissociate in planned moments. Also, not be embarrassed. Speak the language of meditation. So you're at a party, you're anywhere, you tell everybody, I need to meditate. I need to take a moment to myself. And thirdly, in the times when you can't run away, the times when you can't meditate, the times when you've got to, you're in your head and you're having one of these difficult moments, and your wife is knocking on your door and saying, come on, honey, we've got to go and see your daughter's first dance recital, and you're having that moment, brace yourself and do your best. Forgive yourself if you have to look at your wife and say, I'm sorry, honey, I can't do it today. And hopefully your wife will say, it's okay, I understand. I'm always here for you. I encourage you, but of course it's okay if you don't come with. Hopefully you have a partner who can come in and hug you and say, I love you, and you never have to do anything. But remember how we talked about how you can do your best to still be in your life and to be here for your daughter's dance recital, because you might regret it if you don't. I'll be here with you. I'll hold your hand the whole time. And you go out and you make that recital and you make the memories and you get to live a regular human existence. That's the ideal. But when you have to say to your wife, sorry, not today, and she comes in and she encourages you, and you say, I appreciate this so much, honey, but still today's not the day. She kisses you and says, I love you. Don't feel bad. There'll be plenty more recitals. And you do what you got to do in that room by yourself and forgive yourself. Forgive yourself, forgive yourself, forgive yourself. Eventually, if you forgive yourself, the emotional entanglement, taking it personally, will dissolve. And then you can deal objectively with your need to deal with the 12th house. That was a deep one. 12th house energy is very important. It's very important to me. I have Ketu in the 12th house of Cancer. So maybe this is why I feel I speak to the 12th house a lot. It's an important energy for me too. But in any case, ladies and gentlemen, that was it. That was our Pluto in difficult houses reading. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. Now I'm just going to take a quick moment here because I've had my blessed audience hanging out with me and saying a lot. And I'm always glad to see, for anybody watching this live, you'll be able to look at the comments section, and there's lots of cool comments. Someone asked if this is Vedic. I would say I'm a tropical Vedic person, but even somebody with the Vedic Pluto in the 12th house, with sidereal Pluto in the 12th house, if that's what you jive by, this video hopefully will still bring you some resolution. Nice to see Morgan Marasteri is hanging out with us. Some people were talking about rectifying the chart and the houses. Horror movies are not good for humanity. I get that, Song Signs. Some people like them, and I get it. I had a Scorpio rising girlfriend who just loved horror movies. Wonderful. Nynx Luna is asking what house system I use. I generally use the whole sign system, such that, for example, when we were giving our example of a Libra rising, even if the 12th house cusp falls into the 11th sign from Libra, which would be Leo, or if, let's say, Pluto is at 1 degree of Virgo, and the 12th house cusp is at 20 degrees of Virgo. That means Pluto is behind the 12th cusp. Pluto, to me, if it's in the 1st degree of Virgo, is still in the 12th sign from Libra. And that gives it a 12th house energy. Especially because in that case, I would especially say it's the case, because in that case, the 12th house cusp falls in the same sign as Pluto. So the 12th house cusp and Pluto are sharing the 12th house cusp dispositor, which is Mercury. So I will generally use a whole sign system, and I interweave the cusps within that on the basic foundation of the 12 whole sign system. That's how I operate as a tropical Vedic astrologer, and I hope that's clear. So all in all, folks, this has been a long video. Hopefully there's not too many skips and cuts and pops. I love doing this for you guys. I love doing it with you guys as my fellow passionate explorers of the internal realms of the psyche, the medicine of spirit, the medicine of the soul. I appreciate that you are all just as passionate about it as I am. I like to consider myself just a vessel who's just passionate about talking about these things. And you guys are here doing it with me, and I'm very happy for that. So stay tuned. For those watching now, next week we're going to do our cold readings. I've been doing the cold readings. It's every second Thursday of the month. So next Thursday is the second Thursday of the month. So we're going to do cold readings. You can hang out with me, and I'll read your chart for a half an hour, 45 minutes for free. That's what I'm going to be doing in the next little bit, once a month. And again, for those who have been watching, I've had lots of people hanging out with the live for this video. This has been a very important and special video. I've been glad to have been done it. Glad to be done it. Now I'm going to go eat some food and have some lunch. Truly my pleasure hanging out with everybody here. Nyx Luna, Elizabethany, Morgan Marasteri, Song Signs, nice to see you. Glux Klee was a big part of our hangout today. Genius POV, pleasure to see you here, amigo. We've got somebody named Jupiter was watching with us. Angel Ocasio, you've been making lots of comments on my channel, and I appreciate seeing you. Let's see, who else was here? Carmen Monroe was hanging out. and so many other people. That was our main crowd. We also had Grounded Extracts. Robin Evans was here. Asia Amani. And I appreciate you all so much. So I could stay here and keep on kissing you, and I'm thinking about it. But at some point, we gotta rock and roll here, folks. Jessica Kareen, nice to see you as well, my dear. It's been a pleasure. Now I'm gonna go and stop taking my pops' internet. I'm Dustin Cormier. I'm How to Rock Astrology. Keep your eyes peeled for my book. It's gonna be coming out at some point. It's gonna have Plutonian energy inside it, and it's a novel. And I can't wait to describe it to you and get it going as it comes along. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoy. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed it.